The road ahead was a ribbon of black, slick and unbroken under the weak glow of my headlights. I could feel the quiet pressing in from all sides, the kind of silence that doesn't just settle, it waits. Each mile closer to Miller's Hollow made the air heavier, like walking underwater, and I couldn't shake the sense that something was watching from just beyond the beams of light. Street lamps popped on and off in uneven flickers, and for a moment, it felt like the town was breathing, inhaling and exhaling in time with the tires rolling over cracked asphalt. I gripped the wheel tighter. The radio was dead static, humming low and constant, no stations, no voices. Usually that's nothing unusual out here, but tonight, every static burst felt like a whisper in the darkness. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, half expecting headlights that weren't there. Nothing, just more black, but my skin prickled and I knew the feeling wasn't going away. The first sign that something was off wasn't the emptiness. It was the smell, smoke, rot, something earthy and metallic that made my stomach lurch. I cracked the window a fraction, hoping to catch a scent, anything that would explain it. It hit me then. There were no chimneys, no fires, no signs of life at all. Just the faint, iron-tinged air that made my throat dry. I swallowed, the motion loud in the quiet of the cab, and tried to remind myself why I'd come. I had a call, a routine check, or at least it was supposed to be routine. Local dispatch reported the town had gone quiet, no activity for weeks, maybe months. Check on the area, they said. See if anything's left behind. They didn't mention the stories. I hadn't asked. Some things aren't official. Some things you only hear when the nights get long and the towns get empty and people vanish into the kind of silence that makes you rethink your job choice. The sign came into view, Miller's Hollow. The wooden letters were chipped and peeling, half hidden by overgrown weeds and shadows stretching long under the flickering streetlights. I slowed, letting the car roll through the entrance. Gravel crunched under the tires, loud in the oppressive stillness. Houses lined the main street like cardboard cutouts, their windows staring back with dark, empty eyes. Porches sagged under their own weight. Paint peeled in long strips, and the doors, all shut tight, seemed to be holding something in, or keeping something out. I parked in the center of town, next to what had once been a gas station. Rusted pumps leaned awkwardly, their nozzles dangling like broken limbs. I stepped out and the air hit me differently, cold, still, and heavy with that metallic tang again. My boots scuffed on the gravel, but it sounded muffled, like the town absorbed noise the way a sponge absorbs water. I moved toward the station, each step deliberate, my flashlight cutting through the darkness in a narrow cone. Shadows shifted at the edges, and I told myself it was just the wind through the broken windows. But there was no wind. Inside, dust motes hung in the beam of the light, floating in the air like tiny, indifferent ghosts. Shelves were overturned, cans and bottles long rotted or cracked open. A broken clock hung on the wall, its hands frozen at 10:15. My eyes caught a smear of something dark on the counter, crusted and old, but recent enough to make me hesitate. I swallowed hard and leaned closer, flashlight trembling slightly. It was just dirt, or maybe dried blood, but I didn't know, and my gut twisted with the certainty that I'd rather not. A sound came then, a faint tapping like fingernails on wood echoing from somewhere upstairs. My heart thudded. I spun the light toward the stairs, each step creaking in response to my gaze. Tap-a-tap-a-tap. It stopped. I froze. Every instinct screamed to leave, but the job, whatever that meant tonight, kept my feet rooted. I forced myself to remember the streets outside. I'd driven past empty houses before. I'd walked into abandoned warehouses, seen graffiti and broken glass. But Miller's Hollow wasn't like those places. It wasn't abandoned in a normal sense. It felt paused, like a photograph left out in the rain, everything fading, but the edges still sharp enough to hurt your eyes. The town square was next. I stepped outside again, letting the flashlight swing slowly, scanning the empty buildings. There was a diner on the corner, its neon sign half-lit, flickering in broken rhythm. I could hear the hum of electricity somewhere, faint but insistent, like the town had a heartbeat of its own. My stomach dropped. There shouldn't have been power. Nothing should have worked. A single swing on the playground creaked in the wind, Or maybe it wasn't wind. I couldn't see the trees moving. My breath came shallow now, clouding in the cold night air. I moved closer and the swing stopped creaking as I approached. I stopped too. The town didn't move, didn't breathe, but it felt alive in the wrong way, like watching a body in a morgue twitch. I noticed the police station next. Its windows were boarded up, but one corner had a slit just wide enough to see inside. Dust covered the desk, papers scattered, but the typewriter was gone. Someone or something had taken it. A soft scuff from inside made me freeze and my flashlight flickered. I blinked. Nothing moved. I stepped back, telling myself I was imagining things, that shadows play tricks, but the air carried a faint whisper just on the edge of hearing. My name? Maybe. Maybe not. I returned to the car, trying to shake the feeling pressing down my chest. Headlights caught something in the corner of the town, a figure, a coat swinging in the distance. My mind wanted to fill it with explanation. A homeless person, a stray dog, a trick of the light. But the figure didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood, staring, though I couldn't tell if it had eyes or was just the shape of absence. I got back inside the car and locked the doors. The engine hummed like a lullaby, comforting and familiar. Yet outside, the town waited. Every flicker of street lamp, every stretch of shadow seemed to lean closer, pressing against the glass, listening. I realized then fully that Miller's Hollow didn't welcome visitors. It observed them, studied them, let them wander alone in the silence that stretched and thickened until it wasn't just empty, it was hungry. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. My flashlight lay on the passenger seat, but I kept it off. Every flicker outside seemed like an accusation, every shadow a sentence. There was history here, dark, unspoken history. I couldn't see it yet, but I felt it, lurking beneath the crumbling asphalt and peeling paint. The car radio sparked once, a burst of static that sounded almost like laughter. My skin prickled. I told myself again, empty towns make noises. Old wiring hums, wind hits a broken pane. But that was no wind, that was deliberate. I drove slowly toward the center of town again, circling, trying to see if anyone or anything moved. Nothing. Nothing except the flickering lights and the rustling leaves that hadn't moved in the faint wind. My heart kept time with the swing that had stopped creaking, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to leave or walk further into the unknown. Then I saw it. A single light, a window up on the second floor of one of the houses, glowing faintly. Warm, yellow, almost inviting, and yet wrong. There was no electricity here, no sign of life for years. I parked again, closer this time, and the air grew colder. My breath fogged in front of me, hanging like a ghost that refused to vanish. I raised the flashlight again, aiming at the window, and for just a second I thought I saw movement, a shape. Someone or something standing just behind the glass, waiting, watching me. I blinked. The shape was gone, nothing but empty darkness. And that's when I understood it fully. Miller's Hollow wasn't empty. Not really. It just let you think it was until you noticed the wrongness of everything around you. The way silence could feel heavy. The way shadows could linger. The way street lamps didn't just flicker, they whispered. I sat in the car, gripping the wheel, wondering how long I could stay before the town decided I'd been seen enough. Every instinct screamed to leave, but a part of me, one I didn't want to admit, wanted to step out, wanted to walk the empty streets, to see what waited in the flickering lights. And maybe that was the mistake everyone had made before me. The wind, or what I thought was wind, stirred the leaves. The faint hum of electricity pulsed under the ground, through the cracked asphalt. And somewhere, just beyond the circle of my headlights, something moved. I didn't know if it was human. I didn't know if it wanted to speak or watch or lure me in. But I did know this. Miller's Hollow was alive in the wrong way, and it would not let me leave untouched. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. I could leave now, but the pull to see the town in its entirety, to understand its silence, was stronger than any rational thought. One more street, one more building, one more glance. And then, maybe, I'd understand why the town never truly sleeps. The street stretched ahead like a stage, empty, still. yet vibrating with a tension I couldn't shake. My boots crunched over broken glass and scattered gravel as I moved past shuttered shops, their windows reflecting my flashlight in distorted, watery shapes. Every door I passed seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in rhythm with the quiet hum of the town. I told myself it was just the settling of old wood, the way abandoned places groan at night, but my chest knew better. A sudden tap echoed from somewhere down the block. My head snapped in the direction, heart hammering. Footsteps. Mine didn't make that sound. I froze, letting the beam of light sweep across the cracked sidewalk, the peeling paint of a storefront. Nothing. Just shadows leaning lazily across the walls, curling at the corners like smoke. Then I heard it again, closer this time, soft and deliberate, a tap 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 that wasn't quite in rhythm with the town. I swallowed. My flashlight trembled slightly in my hand, casting long, jittering shadows across the buildings. I wanted to convince myself it was a rat, some animal scratching in the debris, but the pattern was too precise, too human. I forced myself forward, stepping onto the cracked pavement of the main street. The neon signs of closed stores flickered weakly, casting half-light across the sidewalks. Some lights buzzed in uneven stutters, others dimmed altogether, leaving pools of darkness where my imagination could stretch and twist shapes into figures that weren't there. A whisper brushed my ear, soft and fleeting. My head snapped to the side, searching for a source. Empty street. The wind, I tried to reason it, but even the tiniest breeze would have rustled the leaves that weren't moving. I stopped walking, listening, every muscle coiled tight. Silence pressed back against me, heavier than before. Another whisper. This one carried a word I couldn't catch, or maybe I didn't want to. I felt my stomach tighten as the beam of my flashlight scanned the broken windows of a corner store. Shelves were upturned, glass bottles scattered like fallen teeth. Something dark clung to the floor, smeared across the tile, but the shape was indistinct, more suggestion than substance. My pulse quickened. I leaned closer, careful, flashlight slicing a narrow path through the gloom. The street behind me seemed different. I glanced over my shoulder, heart lurching. Footsteps, not mine, slow, soft, but deliberate. They stopped when I stopped. They moved when I moved. I held my breath, counting seconds. Nothing. Then a faint scrape, metal against concrete, somewhere behind the boarded-up post office. I could feel it watching me, waiting. I should have turned back. I wanted to. But something deeper, a curiosity I didn't trust, drove me forward. I approached a small alley between two houses. Shadows pooled inside it, black and silent. My flashlight flicked over discarded crates and broken chairs, revealing nothing but decay and dust. Yet I felt it, the awareness of another presence. I stepped carefully into the alley, each footfall muffled by the thick, sticky layer of dirt. Something moved at the edge of my vision. Just a shift in darkness, a flutter. My breath caught. I spun the light and the alley was empty. I moved past the alley and into the heart of the town's residential block. Houses leaned slightly, their boards warped and nails rusted. Front porches sagged under the weight of years. Windows gaped open like empty mouths staring. A cold wind, or the memory of one, slithered down the street, raising goosebumps across my arms. I heard a soft laugh then, low, almost imperceptible. My mind refused to name it, refused to believe it. My hands clenched into fists, flashlight trembling. One house caught my attention. A pale glow spilled from a crack beneath the door. I stepped closer, boots careful against the gravel. The light flickered faintly, almost in response to my presence. I paused. Should I knock? No, my hand hovered over the door frame, flashlight tight in my grip. I didn't move. The whisper came again, brushing my ear, almost teasing, unintelligible but deliberate. The light pulsed as if beckoning or warning. A sudden sound from the roof made me flinch, a creak, like someone shifting weight above me. I swung the flashlight upward. Nothing. Only the silhouette of the house outlined against a sky that had no stars, only a faint, sickly haze of clouds. My pulse raced. I took a step back, trying to convince myself the town was empty, that it was just old wood and bad wiring. But Miller's Hollow had a pulse I could feel in my chest, a rhythm that didn't belong to me. I moved on, passing a closed diner. The glass in the front window was cracked in a spiderweb pattern. My reflection stared back, pale and twitching under the beam of light. I saw something else too, just for a fraction of a second. A figure crouched near the back wall, head low, shoulders hunched. My heart slammed. I spun around, nothing. When I looked back, the figure was gone. My chest tightened, a sharp ache in my ribs, and a whisper echoed in the alley behind me. Don't leave. I wanted to run to get back to my car, but the main street drew me forward. My curiosity and fear were tangled, twisting me toward the abandoned church at the end of the block. Its steeple loomed in the dim glow of the flickering street lamp. The front doors were chained, but the lock was broken, hanging loose. I stepped closer, flashlight trembling. The air here was different, heavier, thick with the smell of damp wood and something metallic. I thought I heard footsteps inside, faint, echoing. But when I pressed my ear to the door, there was nothing. I moved along the edge of the street, passing empty shops with faded signs. A toy store, a bakery, a barber. Every place felt paused in time. The toy store had dolls lined up in the window, faces cracked, eyes starring. I could swear they moved when I wasn't looking. In the bakery, flour dust hung in the air, settling slowly, almost suspended, as if someone had just left. I knew no one had. The whispers followed me still, now layered, coming from multiple directions. I spun in place, trying to catch a source. There was nothing visible, just an invisible rhythm guiding my movements. I felt the town shift beneath my feet. The cracks in the asphalt seemed deeper, the shadows sharper. Every building leaned slightly toward me, silently observing. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment I saw a doorway open where there had been none. I froze, staring. Then it closed. A sudden gust, or something pretending to be a gust, stirred the leaves, and the scent of iron hit stronger. My stomach twisted. Footsteps again, careful, packing me. I wanted to call out, to demand someone show themselves, but my voice caught in my throat. I wanted to run, but the street stretched endlessly, the same buildings looping in subtle shifts I didn't trust my eyes to track. I stopped at the corner of the town square. My flashlight caught the fountain, cracked and dry, its stone etched with moss. And then I noticed the sound, dripping water. Impossible. The fountain was dry. I approached, kneeling, shining the light over the stone basin. Nothing. Yet I could feel it, something just beneath the surface, watching, waiting, amused by my careful movements. The whispers were louder now, weaving through the empty streets, some high, some low. I could make out fragments, names, words I didn't recognize, a soft hissing that could have been a warning or an invitation. I pressed my flashlight higher, scanning the buildings. A figure appeared in the distance, just a silhouette at the end of the square. I froze. It didn't move, didn't blink. And then, impossibly, it vanished, leaving only the echoes of my own breathing in the vast emptiness. I leaned against the curb, chest heaving, trying to steady my pulse. The streets were empty, yet not. The town breathed around me, watching, whispering. Every step I took seemed to leave a mark, a memory in the cracked asphalt, as if Miller's Hollow remembered every trespasser, every night wanderer who dared to come this close. The sun wasn't rising. I realized I hadn't checked the time, but the darkness pressed in the same relentless weight. Shadows stretched impossibly long. The whispers continued, teasing, following, never resolving. I wanted to leave, to run to the car, but I felt drawn deeper into the maze of empty streets, curiosity tangled with dread, both stronger than sense. And as I walked, I noticed something new. Footprints in the dirt, fresh, leading in the opposite direction I'd come from. I hadn't seen anyone, yet here they were. Small, human-like, perfectly shaped. But they didn't belong to me, and they didn't lead anywhere I recognized. The town had a rhythm now, a pulse I could feel in my chest, in my ears, in my skin. It was alive in the way abandoned places never are, aware in the way no building should be. Miller's Hollow had eyes I couldn't see, ears I couldn't locate, and somewhere just out of reach, it was moving, breathing, waiting. I paused, flashlight sweeping one last time over the street. Shadows pooled unnaturally under the flickering lamps. I heard the faintest whisper, a single word drawn out, deliberate. Stay. And I understood fully. This town didn't want visitors. Not really. It wanted witnesses. I didn't know if I could leave, and I didn't know if I wanted to. I didn't mean to stumble into the old library, but the building drew me in like a magnet. Its sign was faded, hanging by a single rusted hinge. The windows were opaque with grime, but a dim glow escaped from within, weak and inviting, and for some reason I felt compelled to go inside. The door creaked under my push, groaning like a wounded animal, and the smell hit me first. Dust, mold, and something else, something sweet and cloying I couldn't place. My stomach tightened. Shelves leaned at odd angles, sagging under decades of forgotten books and newspapers. The floorboards moaned beneath my boots, a subtle protest, but the sound felt deliberate, echoing down the aisles like the building itself was alive. I moved slowly, flashlight in hand, careful not to disturb anything, but it didn't matter. The air here had weight, thick and expectant, holding its breath as I wandered through the aisles. Then I saw them, clippings pinned to a bulletin board, yellowed and curling at the edges. I stepped closer, heart thudding, and began to read. The headlines were simple, mundane, almost ordinary. Miller family missing, local police seek clues, one read, dated 1978. Another, smaller article, house searched after strange sightings, described neighbors reporting lights in the empty house, furniture moved, toys left in impossible arrangements. My pulse quickened. This was the family, the ones the town whispered about, the ones that vanished without a trace. I traced my finger along the fragile paper, careful not to tear it. The photographs pinned there made my chest ache. The family smiled at the camera. Mother, father, 2 children, a dog. They were frozen in a moment of happiness, but their eyes, there was something off. Too sharp, too aware. Almost like they were already watching me even now through the brittle page. A faint creak from the floor made me spin. The library was empty, or at least it should have been. Dust motes hung lazily in the beam of my flashlight. I took a slow breath, telling myself it was just the old building settling. But I knew better. Miller's Hollow wasn't normal. Nothing here was normal. I crouched and examined the clippings further. There were letters from neighbors, vague and trembling, describing the strange occurrences after the family disappeared. Toys left in the street, dishes on the porch for no one, footprints that appeared in the garden overnight and vanished by morning. One note mentioned laughter echoing through the house when no one was home. Another spoke of shadows moving across windows at night, figures glimpsed in the corner of the eye, vanishing when looked at directly. I swallowed hard, the weight of it pressing on my chest. My flashlight beam landed on a smaller stack of papers tucked beneath a shelf. I pulled them out carefully. They were police reports filed in neat handwriting decades ago, each one cataloging the family's sudden disappearance. No bodies were found. No evidence of a struggle. Only the house, untouched, preserved, almost waiting. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. The idea lodged itself in my mind. What if they weren't gone at all? What if the town hadn't allowed them to leave, or worse, what if they had never truly left? My pulse thundered in my ears as I scanned the documents. Notes about strange sounds, fleeting movements in empty rooms, neighbors insisting they could hear voices behind locked doors. I could feel it, an invisible presence, something watching me now as I read. A scrap of paper fluttered from the top of the stack. I bent to pick it up. The words were handwritten, hurried, a child's handwriting perhaps. "They see you," it said. No signature, no date, just that, "They see you." My breath hitched. The library, the empty streets, the town itself. It all made sense in a way I didn't want to admit. Miller's Hollow didn't forget. It remembered. And it watched. I heard it then, a faint scuffing coming from behind the rows of bookshelves. My flashlight swung toward the sound, catching only dust motes dancing in the beam. Nothing. I told myself to calm down, to breathe, but the feeling of being observed thickened, pressing against my skin like a tangible weight. I took a step forward, then froze. A shadow moved just beyond the edge of the light. Quick, deliberate, and yet impossible to track. I blinked. It was gone. Something compelled me to move deeper into the building, toward the back. The floorboards creaked under my weight, each step a statement, each sound swallowed by the heavy silence. I reached the old reading room. The furniture was stacked in odd patterns, chairs atop tables, books scattered in piles that didn't make sense. A faint smell of smoke lingered, though the fireplace had been cold for decades. My flashlight flickered, and in the brief darkness, I thought I saw a small handprint on the dusty floor. Small, child-sized, and yet there was no one there. I knelt down, brushing away the dust. The print was fresh, crisp edges, no dust covering it. My heart thundered. That shouldn't have been possible. I was alone. I was supposed to be alone, and yet the evidence said otherwise. A whisper brushed past my ear, soft, almost inaudible. My head snapped toward the source. Nothing, just the shadows, the silent, waiting shadows. But the words had been real, unmistakable. "Don't leave," I swallowed, hand tightening around the flashlight. The air felt colder now, heavier. My breath came fast, visible in short bursts in the dim light. I continued through the reading room, flashlight scanning every corner. That's when I noticed the photographs. They were pinned to a corkboard at the back wall, the family again, smiling, frozen in that impossible moment. But something was wrong. Each time I looked away and back, the arrangement seemed different. The mother's head tilted slightly. The children's eyes seemed to shift, just fractions of a degree, enough to make me doubt my own sight. My stomach twisted. My mind tried to reason it. Flicker of light, strain on eyes, imagination. But my gut knew better. I picked up one of the papers and the edges crumbled slightly under my fingers. I read the caption. "The Miller family, last seen entering their home, 1978. My gaze drifted beyond the photo. The window behind the corkboard was cracked, letting in a sliver of moonlight that touched the floor. And in that light, I saw footprints. Small, child-sized, leading from the corner of the room to the bookshelf where I had found the print. I froze. My brain screamed it wasn't possible. The town was supposed to be abandoned. The family had disappeared decades ago. And yet here were signs, undeniable, of movement within the last few minutes. I swallowed hard, stepping backward. Every instinct told me to run, to leave immediately, but curiosity, dangerous, unreasoning curiosity, pushed me forward. I followed the footprints, careful, flashlight sweeping ahead. They led to a small door, half hidden behind the stacks of shelves. I hesitated, hand hovering over the knob. Something pulsed behind the door, slow, deliberate, like the heartbeat of the house itself. My breath caught. I wanted to open it, wanted to know. And yet part of me screamed that opening it would change everything. The whispers returned, louder now, surrounding me from all directions. "They see you, they know." I pressed my back against the wall, eyes darting. Shadows pooled unnaturally under the shelves. The air vibrated with a silent hum, a pulse I felt in my chest, in my bones. I realized then that the town, the library, the house, they were not separate. Everything was one, aware, attentive, and patient. I opened the small door just a crack. The room beyond was dark, empty, or appeared so. A chill seeped through the gap, carrying the faintest scent of smoke and decay. And then the unmistakable sound of a child laughing. High-pitched, soft, deliberate. The kind of laugh that lingers in the mind long after it stops. I stepped back, my hand trembling on the doorframe. The footprints ended. The air was still again, heavy, waiting. And I knew with a certainty that sent a cold spike through me that the family had never left. Not entirely. Not really. Miller's Hollow had kept them, shaped them. And perhaps added me to its record of watchers, of witnesses. I backed away, trying to calm my racing heart. The library, the town, the family, they were all stitched together, threads of a story that refused to be completed. I realized with a sickening clarity that I was now part of that story, a character in a narrative written decades before my arrival. And as I stepped back toward the main street, the photographs on the corkboard seemed to shift one last time. The family smiled at the camera, eyes sharp, alive, aware. And I understood. The town remembered everything, every presence, every intrusion. The Miller family had vanished physically, yes, but they remained always in some form, waiting, watching. I left the library quietly, each step echoing across the empty streets. The whispers followed me, softer now, teasing, never fully leaving. I glanced back once, and the building seemed to pulse faintly, a heartbeat in the night. I knew I would return. I didn't want to, and yet I would. The town had a hold on me, subtle, inexorable, and I was already ensnared. The streets were still empty, or so they appeared, but I knew better now. Miller's Hollow never truly empties. It just waits for the next witness, the next step, the next curiosity to wander too close. And I had wandered. The town square felt different now, heavier, like it had been waiting for me to arrive. The lampposts flickered in uneven patterns, casting patches of light that moved across the cracked cobblestones. I stepped cautiously, flashlight sweeping, but the beam didn't seem to penetrate the darkness fully. Shadows curled and stretched as if alive, and the air carried a chill that wasn't just cold, it was deliberate, aware. I paused near the fountain at the center of the square, the cracked stone gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Drips of water fell into the basin, though it had been dry for decades. The sound echoed unnaturally, magnified across the empty buildings. I took a step closer, and the drips quickened, as if responding to me, anticipating my movements. My stomach tightened. Something shifted behind me, a movement just beyond the edge of the lamplight. I swung the flashlight, but nothing was there. The square was empty, or so it should have been. The wind, or whatever this was, stirred a loose paper across the cobblestones. I bent to pick it up. It was an old note, yellowed and brittle. Only 3 words, "You shouldn't be here." My breath hitched. My hand trembled. I straightened and glanced toward the buildings surrounding the square. Windows stared down at me, dark and empty, but I felt them watching, following my every move. A low whisper drifted through the night air, almost teasing. "Why are you here?" My pulse quickened. I took a step back, and the whisper followed, circling, echoing off the empty walls. I tried to ground myself, telling my mind it was exhaustion, the tension, the isolation. But the hair on my arm stood on end, and the chill in my chest wouldn't go away. Something in the town square was alive, something that had waited for me to come. Footsteps, deliberate, paced around me. I spun in place, flashlight slicing through the darkness. Nothing, but the sound persisted, circling, patient. I could feel the presence in my chest, a pressure that wasn't air but intent. I took a hesitant step forward. The footsteps mimicked mine. I stopped. They stopped. My heartbeat roared in my ears. A shadow detached itself from a building corner, tall, thin, almost unreal. My light caught it just long enough to see a shape, but the edges blurred like smoke in the wind. And then it was gone, leaving only the lingering feeling of being observed. I swallowed hard. I was alone, but not alone. The town was watching, and whatever it was, it wanted me to know it could reach me without showing itself fully. I focused on the fountain again. The dripping had stopped. The water lay still in the basin, black and reflective. I leaned over slightly, and my own reflection shimmered in the surface. But for a brief moment I saw another face, pale, childlike, eyes too large, staring back. I jerked upright. Nothing remained. My flashlight beam trembled across the square as I tried to reassure myself it had been a trick of light, a fleeting shadow, exhaustion manifesting visually. Then the whispers came again, closer now, wrapping around me, almost tangible. "You see us, you see everything." I spun, heart hammering, but the square was still. No one. Just the lamplights flickering, the old buildings, the faint rustle of leaves, or was it breath? I tried to tell myself it was the wind, but I knew better. The square wasn't empty. A flicker of movement drew my attention to the edge of the square. A figure, just a shadow, tall, humanoid, standing perfectly still. I focused, flashlight trembling in my grip. It tilted its head slowly, deliberately, and I felt a chill deeper than the night air crawl down my spine. I wanted to speak, to demand it show itself, but no sound came. My throat felt dry, constricted. The figure moved just a few steps, gliding across the cobblestones with unnatural silence. And yet with every movement the lamplights dimmed, casting longer shadows, as if the square itself bent to accommodate its passage. I took a step back, tripping over a loose stone, catching myself just in time. The figure paused, and in that instant I realized it wasn't alone. Shadows flared along the edges of the building, stretching toward me, curling, reaching. The air grew colder. My breath came in shallow bursts, visible in the faint light. I wanted to run, to flee the square entirely, but my legs felt heavy, rooted to the ground. I could feel eyes on me from every angle. The whispers layered over each other now, multiple voices, some high, some low, overlapping. "You can't leave, not yet." I forced myself to move, taking deliberate steps across the square. The figure mirrored me perfectly, always just beyond the range of the flashlight. My mind screamed that it was impossible, that no one could move so silently, so perfectly. Yet the evidence was undeniable. I could feel the presence, sense its patience, its intention. I stumbled upon the old clock tower at the center of the square. Its face was cracked, hands frozen at 11:47. A faint chime echoed, soft, distant, impossible. The figure stopped at the base of the tower. It didn't move toward me, but I could feel the weight of its gaze, heavy, pressing into my chest. I knew then that the town itself, this square, the buildings, even the shadows, they were extensions of it, and it was testing me. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the flashlight's spare batteries, hands shaking violently. The act felt grounding, tangible, something real in a night where reality warped constantly. I clicked the new battery in, the beam steadying. The figure didn't react, but the whispers shifted, a low hum now, almost like a warning, vibrating through the air, rattling my teeth. I took a tentative step closer toward the tower. The cobblestones beneath my boots felt slick, almost breathing. Shadows pressed against the lamplight, pooling unnaturally, stretching in impossible directions. My chest tightened, and I realized the town square itself had become a labyrinth, bending subtly around me, reshaping to confound me. And then I saw it, or rather them. At the far edge of the square, a group of figures emerged from the darkness. Silhouettes pale, elongated, impossible to focus on fully. I counted 5, then 6. Faces featureless, but eyes small, glinting points in the dark. I froze. They moved closer, gliding silently, circling me, yet never fully entering the light. I felt trapped, enclosed by the square and the presence within it. One figure broke from the group, moving toward the fountain. The water shimmered unnaturally as it approached. My flashlight illuminated it briefly. A distorted human shape, taller than any adult should be, limbs elongated, movements fluid yet impossible. My stomach churned. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. My gaze was locked, drawn to it like a magnet. The whispers intensified, layering over each other. "You can't leave, you saw too much, you belong." My hands gripped the flashlight tighter. My pulse roared, but beneath the fear, a strange clarity arose. The town wasn't just haunted. It wasn't just watching. It was alive. Every building, every shadow, every sound, it had a will, and it had decided I mattered. I backed toward the edge of the square, scanning for an escape. The figures mirrored my movements, a silent echo pressing me back toward the tower. The whispers became almost unbearable, rising to a crescendo, and then suddenly they stopped. Silence, complete, heavy. My ears rang. The absence of sound was a presence itself. And in that silence, I realized the town had given me a choice, or at least an illusion of one. Step forward, step back, it didn't matter. Every action I took was anticipated, absorbed and reflected back. Miller's Hollow wasn't just a place. It was a being, patient, omnipresent, and its patience was terrifying. I dropped to my knees by the fountain, flashlight sweeping frantically. The shadows stretched across the square, pooling like ink in the corners, and the figures gathered at the edges, circling, never touching, always watching. My mind spun. Was this real? Was I awake? Or was this a dream, a trap, a hallucination born from isolation and fear? A whisper, clear and deliberate, brushed my ear. "We've been waiting." My breath caught. I knew instantly this wasn't the Miller family. It was something older, something patient, something that had grown with the town, and it had been waiting for someone like me. I rose slowly, keeping my flashlight trained on the nearest figure. It didn't move. The others remained at the edges, statues of shadow. My chest heaved. I realized I could leave, or so I thought, but the square shifted subtly, corners elongating, shadows deepening. Every exit seemed farther, more impossible. The town had trapped me subtly, inexorably. And then, almost imperceptibly, a small detail caught my eye, a toy, a doll, lying at the base of the fountain. Its face cracked, one eye missing, but the other glinted in the moonlight. I recognized it from the old newspaper clippings. The Miller children. Their presence wasn't past tense. It was now. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The square waited, the shadows waited, the whispers waited. And I understood fully. Miller's Hollow didn't just erase people. It absorbed them. It fed on the curiosity, the fear, the life of those who entered too deeply. And now it wanted me to see everything, understand nothing, and leave, or never leave at all. I stepped back, heart hammering, eyes fixed on the fountain. The figures didn't move. The shadows didn't recede. The air pressed heavier, and I realized with a cold certainty I had crossed the threshold, and the town would not let me go easily. The forest is quiet, too quiet. I drive the Ranger Jeep slowly down the winding path toward Pine Creek Resort, headlights cutting through the darkness like knives. The trees lean in close, branches scratching the roof, whispering. Even the wind seems hushed, as though afraid to disturb something waiting. My radio crackles once, a faint static, then dies. I tell myself it's normal, just the night, but a shiver crawls along my spine. The resort sits at the bend in the road, cabins lined up like sleeping soldiers, their windows dark, curtains drawn tight. It's been abandoned for years, yet the air feels thick with attention. I can't shake the feeling that eyes are on me, hidden behind the wood and glass. The tires crunch on the gravel, but the sound fades unnaturally fast, swallowed by the stillness. I park near the ranger station, the small building at the edge of the resort, its paint peeling and wood weathered. A faint smell of mildew and damp pine drifts out, carried by a breeze that shouldn't exist in such stillness. I step out, boots sinking slightly in the soft earth, and hear it, a creak from one of the cabins. I freeze. A floorboard settling maybe, but the timing is off, too deliberate. I shine my flashlight toward the cabins. The beam cuts through the darkness, landing on rows of windows, lifeless, empty, or so it should be. The shadows inside shift, and I swear I see a curtain twitch. My heart skips. I tell myself it's the wind, a trick of light, but my chest tightens, my palms sweat. There's a weight in the air, a patience that feels almost alive. I start the night rounds, walking slowly between cabins, radio clipped to my belt though it offers no comfort. Each step echoes unnaturally, carried by the emptiness. The moon glints off broken glass in one window. I crouch to examine it, flashlight revealing a smudge on the pane. Fingerprints old but almost fresh. I swallow hard. Who else could be here? Who would want to linger in this place? A sound, soft at first, drifts from the tree line, a branch snapping under a weight too light for a deer. My head snaps toward it. Nothing. Only the trees, dark and still. I move on, telling myself it's nothing, but the sense of being watched tightens. Each cabin I pass feels different, though their shapes are identical. One porch light flickers briefly, though I know there's no electricity. My pulse accelerates. I pause by the largest cabin, the one that was the lodge in the resort's operating days. Its windows are wide, broken in places, revealing interior shadows that shouldn't shift. I step closer, the gravel crunching sharply underfoot, and then I hear it soft, almost a whisper coming from inside. "Hello?" My voice trembles. Silence, just the rustling of leaves, but it isn't a normal sound. It feels deliberate, as if something is testing me. I push the door open slowly. The hinges groan, dust swirls in the beam of my flashlight. Floorboards creak under my weight. The lobby is empty. Chairs overturned, papers scattered. Nothing that should move on its own. Yet I feel eyes on me from corners that should hold nothing but shadow. I move deeper toward the back of the lodge. The whispers return, now more distinct, forming words I can't quite make out. My throat tightens. The air grows colder. My flashlight flickers. I tap it, beam steady again. But the sense of observation has grown stronger, pressing at my shoulders, my chest, my skull. I can almost feel a presence brushing against my skin. I check the guest logs, old and yellowed. Names and dates, a few scribbles from past visitors, but at the bottom, a new entry, fresh looking. "We're watching." My hand shakes. I didn't write that. No one else is here. I spin, flashlight cutting through every shadow. Nothing. Just the silence, thick and suffocating. Outside, the wind shifts. I hear a laugh or something close enough to it. Hollow, distant, carried across the cabins. My skin prickles. I realize I can't tell if it's far away or right behind me. I step back toward the door, hearing footsteps echo in the lobby. Mine? No. They are lighter, softer, gliding rather than walking. I freeze, ears straining. The whisper comes again, this time distinctly. Don't leave yet. I run to the porch, gripping the railing, trying to steady my breathing. The night is still, but the forest feels alive, stretching, waiting. Shadows shift unnaturally at the edge of the trees. I shine my flashlight toward them. For a moment I see a figure fleeting, too fast to track but distinctly human-shaped. And then gone. I step back, heart hammering, realizing the sound of my own heartbeat is loud in the empty resort. I try to rationalize. Rodents, owls, the wind through broken structures. But nothing in my experience explains the feeling of being stalked by the darkness itself, watched by something patient, intelligent. The cabins don't just feel abandoned. They feel territorial, protective, and aware of me. I start walking the perimeter of the resort, flashlight sweeping, every sound amplified. Gravel crunches, leaves rustle. A branch snaps behind me. I spin. Nothing. And yet the weight of eyes on me intensifies. Every cabin seems to lean closer, shadows stretching toward me like fingers. I can hear whispers now, multiple, overlapping, teasing, circling. I reach the old pool, drained, cracked tiles reflecting moonlight. It lies empty, but faint ripples appear on the surface. No wind, no water. I step closer, shining the flashlight across it. Shapes move beneath the surface, shadowed, indistinct. My stomach twists. The shadows pull back when I focus, hiding from the light, waiting. I retreat toward the jeep, trying to shake the growing sense of dread. The headlights illuminate a path, but the forest beyond swallows the beams quickly. Something moves just at the edge, a figure crouched low, observing. I accelerate, tires spinning on the gravel. The figure disappears in a heartbeat, leaving the forest silent again. Back at the ranger station, I lock the doors, radio dead, phone useless. I sit in the chair, trying to make sense of it. The resort is empty. It has been for years. Yet every sign points to observation. The broken glass, the whispers, the footprints in the soft dirt near the cabins. Something has been here, following, waiting, alive in some way I cannot define. I look at the logs again. More notes appear, scrawled in handwriting I don't recognize. We see you. Stay for the night. My pulse races. I feel a presence in the room, heavy, patient. I glance toward the window. Shadows shift inside the forest, shapes moving in impossible patterns, yet entirely natural, as though the trees themselves have learned to walk, to follow. I try to rest, but every sound snaps me awake. The wind that shouldn't exist brushes against the walls. The shadows in the corners stretch toward me. I hear soft footsteps packing just outside the station, circling, testing. And sometimes, just sometimes, a figure stands at the edge of the tree line, watching silently. By dawn, the forest seems normal again. Birds call. Light filters through the trees, but I know the quiet is temporary. The resort isn't abandoned, not really. Pine Creek watches, waits, and learns. And whoever or whatever lives here will remember I came. I leave the ranger station, but the forest doesn't release me. My mind keeps replaying the whispers, the eyes, the weight of the unseen presence. Every night shift ahead will carry that memory, that sense of being observed. Pine Creek doesn't just exist in the woods. It exists in the mind, patient, relentless, waiting for the next curious soul. And I can't stop thinking about the last thing the shadows whispered before I fled. Come back. We'll be here. The monitor flickered again, that soft blue glow casting long shadows across the empty ranger station. I had been staring at it for what felt like hours, watching the grainy images of Pine Creek's cabins, the cracked walkways, and the skeletal trees swaying in the night wind. Everything looked empty, silent. Yet something gnawed at the back of my mind. Something was wrong. The motion sensors were triggering in places I had already walked. I leaned closer to the screen. A figure appeared just for a second, moving across the deck of cabin 9. No, it couldn't be. I'd walked that path 10 minutes ago alone. The infrared light caught nothing but the wooden railings, the dark square of the cabin behind. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, the figure was gone, leaving only shadows that seemed darker than before. The hairs on my neck prickled. I knew the resort was supposed to be empty, long abandoned, a place of memories, dust, and decay. Not this. I'd seen signs before, little things that didn't fit, footprints that faded at odd angles, doors slightly ajar that I was sure I had locked. Now the cameras were showing me movements that should have been impossible. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The wind had shifted. It was colder now, sharper, carrying whispers that might have been my imagination. The beam cut across the cabins, bouncing over windows and rotting shutters. Shadows leapt and twisted in ways that didn't make sense. I thought I saw someone crouched at the far end of the main path, just beyond the tree line. A flash of movement, a human shape, and then nothing. Back inside, the monitor chimed again. A new alert on the motion sensor by cabin 6. I hadn't gone there yet tonight. I felt the pull of curiosity, the need to know, the rising tension of something unseen circling me, studying me. I grabbed my keys, radio clipped to my belt, and stepped back into the night. The gravel crunched underfoot in sharp contrast to the soft rustling of leaves. As I approached cabin 6, I noticed something strange. The cabin door was slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness where light should have reflected. I reached for it, hand trembling, flashlight trembling even more. The motion sensor inside had triggered and the screen showed nothing, but I could feel the presence. Something deliberate, waiting, watching me step closer. I pushed the door open. Dust swirled in the narrow beam of the flashlight, motes dancing in patterns I could swear weren't random. I swept the room. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. Yet the hair on my arm stood straight up. The air was thick, almost viscous, pressing against my lungs. I moved deeper into the cabin, past overturned chairs and broken tables. A picture frame lay on the floor, glass shattered, the image inside faint but visible. A family, smiling, staring right at me. Their eyes seemed to follow as I moved. I reached out to lift the frame, and the monitor at the station lit up again. Cabin 6. Someone or something was in the doorway behind me, just beyond the range of my flashlight. My breath caught. I spun around, empty. The air was still, but the presence remained. Watching, patient, intelligent. The shadows seemed to lean closer. I tried to tell myself it was stress, the long hours, the isolation. But the patterns were too precise, too intentional. Every sensor, every camera, every subtle movement aligned, choreographed to make me question my own sanity. I could feel eyes on me from angles the cameras shouldn't even cover, from the tree line, from inside the trees themselves. I backed out slowly, keeping the flashlight fixed ahead. The monitor blinked again, showing the corridor of cabins from above. I swear I saw multiple figures now, moving silently, shifting between shadows, appearing and vanishing without sound. My stomach turned. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, loud, irregular. Each flash on the screen was a finger pointing at me, a reminder I wasn't alone. I returned to the ranger station, every instinct screaming to lock the doors, but something, curiosity, fear, or both, kept me watching the screens. Cabin 9 lit up again. Another figure, this one closer, standing near the broken railing. A hand raised and then lowered. I leaned in, mesmerized. The figure didn't move like a normal person. The angle was wrong, the posture unnatural, stretched in ways that didn't match human anatomy. A faint whisper brushed against the edges of my hearing. Not from the monitor, not from the cabins, but inside the station, like the walls themselves had learned to speak. I froze, my pulse raced. The whispers carried words I couldn't understand, fragments. "You're here, finally." I turned slowly, flashlight sweeping the room. Nothing. Only shadows, only the flicker of monitor light. I tapped the screens, hopping to reset to see if it was a malfunction. But the feed continued uninterrupted. More movement, more subtle anomalies. Curtains twitching in cabins where no wind could reach. Footsteps packing in the distance, soft, gliding, deliberate. The station seemed to shrink around me, pressing the darkness closer. I could almost feel a breath on the back of my neck. I stepped outside again, compelled to see for myself. The night stretched endlessly, shadows shifting unnaturally between trees, between cabins. I shone the flashlight at the main path. A figure appeared, then another, then none. My mind scrambled to keep up. The sensors blinked, marking movement where I saw nothing, where nothing should be. I realized with a cold, sinking feeling that someone or something was learning my patterns, anticipating me, observing my every step. The screen beside me chimed once more. Cabin 2. The figure there was clear now, crouched low, unnervingly still. And yet when I spun around to look outside, the space was empty. My stomach twisted. A laugh, soft, almost a whisper, echoed through the trees. The kind of sound that isn't a sound but a pressure on your senses. I felt it pressing on my mind, reshaping the world, bending the night to make me doubt my own perception. I returned to the station, sitting, shivering, trying to steady my thoughts. Every camera, every motion sensor, every tiny flicker of light on the screen seemed to suggest one truth. I was being watched, studied. And it wasn't human, or at least not entirely. The way the shadows moved, the way the whispers wrapped around my thoughts, it was patient, intelligent, and relentless. Hours passed, each moment heavier than the last. I monitored the feed, unable to leave, unable to look away. Cabin 9 lit again. The figure raised its hand. This time I saw the face, blank, smooth, featureless, yet somehow human, and then gone, melting into the darkness, leaving the cabin as empty as it had been when I first arrived. My hands shook, my chest tightened. I realized fully that the resort didn't just hold shadows, it held awareness. The wind rose outside, stirring the trees, carrying whispers I could now almost make sense of. "You see us, we see you. Stay," the words pressed into my mind, lingering after the sound disappeared. The monitors flickered, one cabin after another lighting up in sequence as though marking my path, mapping my presence. I leaned back, exhausted, terrified, and yet unable to tear my eyes away. I began to notice patterns, small, terrifying insights. The figures were always just at the edge of vision, teaching me to doubt, testing my perception. Curtains fluttered when I wasn't looking. Doors opened and closed slowly. Footsteps echoed in areas where I had already walked. And the screens, the sensors, the cameras, they all captured what my eyes could not fully comprehend. Dawn was approaching, the first gray light filtering through the forest. Yet the night didn't end. The presence didn't leave. I felt its gaze even as the shadows grew faint. The cameras captured nothing now, but I knew it hadn't gone. Pine Creek watched always. Not just the resort, but the surrounding woods, the paths, the silent cabins. Someone or something had been here before me and would be here long after. I sat in the station, silent, motionless, trying to come to terms with what I had seen. The night had changed everything. The resort wasn't abandoned. Not really. And I understood finally why previous night shifts had gone unreported, why so many logs ended abruptly. Those who stayed too long were noted, observed, and absorbed. I stepped outside one last time before leaving. The forest was still. The cabin seemed empty, and yet I could feel the weight of countless eyes upon me. Pine Creek was alive in ways I couldn't name. Its awareness stretched across every shadow, every tree, every shuttered window. And the thought that it would remember me, watch me in the nights to come, pressed cold against my mind. I drove away slowly, headlights cutting through the trees. Behind me, the monitors lay dark, but the knowledge remained. Something had learned my patterns, had marked me. The whispers, the figures, the impossible movements, they were all waiting for the next shift, the next curious soul. And I knew deep down that the resort's gaze would never let me forget. I woke to the sound of branches scratching against the cabin walls, sharper than the wind should allow. My flashlight lay across the floor, abandoned when sleep, or something like it, had dragged me down. I didn't dare move at first. I could feel the presence before I saw it, a slow pressing weight that seemed to coil around my chest, pushing me into the corner. Through the thin curtain of the window, something shifted. I froze. The shadows didn't belong to the trees outside. They moved against logic, sliding across the snow-dusted ground in shapes that twisted, paused, and then vanished when I blinked. My breath caught. I strained to see, to understand, to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. But I'd been here too long, seen too much, and I knew the mind could only do so much when the world itself refused to behave. The first shadow appeared at the edge of the tree line, tall, darker than the night around it. It swayed slightly as if breathing. My eyes followed, heart hammering. Then another, smaller, crouched low like it was observing me. My body felt disconnected, heavy with dread and disbelief. I could not, and yet I could, see them. And they weren't static, they were deliberate, aware of me. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, the snow crunching underfoot loud in the unnatural quiet. The wind had died. No breeze, no rustle of leaves, only the soft whisper of the shadows against the trees just beyond the reach of my flashlight. They moved in tandem, never random, always just at the edge of what my mind could parse. One would dart to a different tree, and another would pause, waiting. I realized with a chill that sank to my bones that I was being studied, not by humans, not by anything I could name. I forced myself to walk toward them. Each step felt like I was wading through molasses, slow, resisted by unseen pressure. The shadows didn't flee. They didn't approach. They just waited, patient, deliberate. I stopped at the base of a massive pine, shined my light upward. The branches swayed, creaking, but nothing perched above me. Yet I could feel eyes, the way a living thing senses you even when invisible. I forced my voice, shaky, over the silence. "Who's there?" The words died almost immediately, swallowed by the darkness. No answer came, only the movement at the edge of my vision. Then one of the shadows detached itself from the tree line, stretching across the snow, flickering as it went. It wasn't solid, but it carried form, human form. I flinched. My flashlight flickered in my hand, unsteady. The shadow paused at a distance, and I could swear it tilted its head, as if curious, as if considering me. I stumbled backward, and the figure recoiled as well, retreating into the tree line. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps an animal, the way snow and darkness played tricks on perception. But my gut told me otherwise. I'd spent too many nights alone, seen too many impossible things, and this was neither coincidence nor natural. I returned to the cabin, locking the door behind me with trembling hands. The shadows didn't vanish. They pressed against the windows, flickering across the curtains like liquid smoke. The monitors I'd set up for the resort earlier tonight showed nothing. The cameras captured the empty snow, the swaying trees. But outside my window, I could see them clearly. Shapes that were neither solid nor transparent, moving with intent, as if waiting for me to make a mistake. I lit a candle, hoping for warmth, comfort, or perhaps to anchor reality. Its flickering flame cast shadows across the walls of the cabin, long and dancing. And for a moment I felt relief, imagining that the shadows outside were only reflections, tricks, manifestations of exhaustion. But the relief dissolved as I noticed their motion synchronized with the candlelight, stretching, retracting, always against the walls. Not inside, outside, watching, responding. I backed away from the window, shaking, trying to make sense of what I saw. Then one shadow lunged, or it seemed to. It blurred, elongated, and vanished behind a tree. My heart raced. I realized I was imagining the impossible as I watched. The tree line pulsed with movement. Eyes that weren't eyes glimmered just out of range, and every instinct in my body screamed to run, hide, survive. I thought of the monitors again. The resort's sensors, the motion cameras. Why did they not capture this? Why did they fail when my own eyes, unassisted, saw clearly? The thought twisted inside me like a knife. Something here had learned the limits of technology, the limits of human perception, and it used them to remain unseen, to mock, to test. The shadows moved again, creeping closer. I could sense them not just with my eyes, but with my skin, my spine, my very mind. The air felt denser, heavy, pressing. Each breath I took was thick with cold and fear, like inhaling a memory that wasn't mine. I understood then that my awareness of them made me vulnerable. They thrived on observation, anticipation. I could not turn away, not now. I edged toward the window again, careful, each step measured. The candle flickered, casting more than light. It revealed movement, subtle teasing, a rhythm I could not break. The shadows shifted, gliding between trees through the snow, yet never fully appearing. One figure paused just at the edge of the clearing, and I could feel its gaze cutting into me. And then it vanished, completely, as if it had never been there at all. I sank to the floor, back against the wall, trying to breathe. My mind raced. Hours had passed. Time itself felt fractured, the night stretching endlessly. I could hear whispers in the wind, faint, unintelligible, but pressing into my thoughts. See us, wait. The sound was low, curling around my skull, and I could not ignore it. A sudden movement caught my eye. Through the side window, another shadow, smaller, crouched and still. I shone the flashlight. Nothing. My pulse quickened. It was watching, waiting for me to acknowledge it, to make a mistake. I realized coldly that the shadows had been here long before I arrived, and they would be here long after I left. They were the memory of the forest itself, the echo of Pine Creek's abandonment, the residue of all who had dared to watch, to linger. I tried to shake off the fear, tried to ground myself in rationality, but rationality failed. Every instinct, every sense screamed at me. The shadows pulsed in and out of visibility as if breathing. And then I understood they weren't just observing, they were learning, mapping my reactions, my fear, the way I moved. And soon they would know me fully. The candle flickered violently, nearly extinguished. I stumbled to relight it, and in the brief flash I saw them again. Multiple shapes between trees, behind trunks, drifting across the snow. Each one distinct, yet impossible. Each one aware. I realized I had been naive, thinking I could witness them safely, that observation would protect me. It did not. Observation had drawn them, curated them, made me a part of their game. I turned to the monitors instinctively. Blank screens, empty cabins, the illusion of normalcy. My own eyes, the windows, the snow, these were the only truth I had. And yet the truth was terrifying. Something alive in the forest had noticed me, and it had chosen not to reveal itself fully. Not yet. Hours passed in a blur of fear, exhaustion, and observation. Every flicker of movement, every distorted shadow, every whisper in the wind became a thread in a web I could neither escape nor understand. And then, just as the first light of dawn bled across the horizon, the shadows withdrew. Not gone, not vanished. They slipped back into the trees, leaving gaps in the snow, impressions of presence, memories of movement. I stepped outside, shaking. The air was colder than the night should have allowed, crisp, unnatural. The tree line stood empty. The cabins looked lifeless, mundane, normal, but I knew better. The shadows remained, watching, waiting, patient, calculating, and I knew deep down that their game had only just begun. I drove away slowly, eyes flicking to every tree, every patch of darkness. The forest seemed alive, breathing with unseen presence. The shadows would return. They always did. And the thought that they were learning me, remembering me, pressing against the edges of perception, left a weight in my chest I could not shake. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see them, gliding, crouching, moving just beyond sight. The memory of their awareness lingers, heavier than the night itself. I know the questions remain. What are they? What do they want? And most frightening of all, how long before they step from the edges of shadow into the world I thought was mine? I found the gates before I found the asylum. Rusted iron bars, twisted at odd angles, chained and padlocked, yet somehow inviting. I pressed my palm against the cold metal. It shivered under my touch, not from wind, I realized, but as if something inside recognized me. I should have walked away. I should have listened to that small, screaming voice in my head. But curiosity isn't polite, and I had deadlines. The air smelled of iron and decay. A bird flinched from a broken branch, cawing as it disappeared into the night. I slipped through a gap at the side, careful not to disturb the chain. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, illuminating crumbling walls and weeds clawing their way through cracked concrete. Every step echoed like a warning. Every shadow felt alive. Inside, the main building loomed like a hulking corpse. Windows, some shattered, some boarded, stared at me like empty eyes. The door was thick wood, warped by time but unlocked. I pushed, the hinges groaning a note of resistance, as if the building itself exhaled slowly after decades of silence. Hallways stretched out in labyrinthine angles, paint peeling in long, curling sheets, exposing layers of forgotten colors. The smell of mildew clung to everything. I passed doors with faded signs. Observation, isolation, treatment. Each label made my stomach twist. I didn't want to know what had happened here, but I had to see. That was the trap, knowing that once curiosity grabbed you, it didn't let go. A sudden draft whispered past my ear, carrying a faint metallic scent. I froze, convinced someone had moved behind me. Footsteps. No, silence. Just the building breathing, or was it? I tried to focus on the flashlight beam, scanning corners where darkness pooled like liquid. Shadows shifted, not naturally. They moved in ways that made my skin crawl, stretching along walls and ceilings, then snapping back into place as if ashamed of being seen. In the old records room, I found folders strewn across a decaying desk. Patient names, dates, procedures, most faded into illegibility. But one folder stayed sharp, almost new, as if preserved intentionally. Inside, I saw photographs, pale faces, hollow eyes, expressions of silent terror frozen on film. I turned the page. Notes scribbled in a tight, hurried hand documented experiments, chemical trials, surgical procedures meant to enhance compliance, whatever that meant. The words made my throat dry. Some of these patients had vanished without record, their files crossed out, yet their pictures remained. A sound made me whip around. A floorboard creaked above me. I wasn't supposed to be alone. My heart raced. I told myself it was old wood settling. But the longer I stayed, the heavier the presence grew. It pressed against my spine, whispered at the edges of thought like someone or something was waiting for me to notice it. I moved toward the main stairwell. The steps groaned under my weight. I tried to imagine I was anywhere else. My own apartment, a crowded street, anything but this asylum, but reality refused to budge. At the top, doors lined the hall, some ajar, others sealed with rusted locks. Behind one, a faint light shimmered, not electric, not natural. It danced across the walls, flickering in uneven rhythms like a candle in a storm. I approached. The door was cold to the touch, ice seeping into my palm. I peeked inside. The room was empty, or nearly. Shadows pooled in corners, clinging to walls, stretching across the floor. The light originated nowhere and everywhere. I swallowed hard. I told myself it was a reflection, my imagination, the building playing tricks. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. It was watching me, testing me, learning me. I moved further down the hall. Doors rattled with the faintest touch, though I hadn't moved them. Each step made my pulse a drum in my ears. Something shifted behind me, subtle, almost imperceptible. A figure. No, just a shadow. But it mirrored my movement perfectly, reacting before I acted, and that made my blood run cold. In one room, I discovered the old patient cells. Small, windowless, claustrophobic. Rusted metal doors hung ajar. Inside, a chair bolted to the floor, stains long dried into patterns I didn't want to interpret. My flashlight caught something on the wall, scratches, deep, frantic, as if someone had clawed at the paint with all their strength. I traced them with my finger. They formed letters. A word, help. I froze, my mind screamed to leave, but something tethered me to the place. A notebook lay open on the floor, pages filled with shorthand and diagrams, plans for experiments, medications, observations of behavior. Names crossed out, replaced, rewritten. I recognized the handwriting from the folders downstairs. Whoever had documented this had left clues or warnings. A sudden slam echoed through the building. My flashlight flickered. I spun. Nothing. Just the long, dark hallway stretching behind me. My chest tightened. I realized I was being lured deeper, drawn by the archives, the files, the shadows that had begun to move differently now, anticipating, almost beckoning me forward. I reached the administration office. A large window looked out over the overgrown courtyard. Moonlight filtered through broken panes, scattering across the floor. And there, reflected in the glass, I saw them. Figures, not human, not entirely. Their shapes were elongated, faces twisted in ways that made my stomach knot. I blinked. They vanished. But the imprint of their presence lingered, as if the glass itself remembered. I stumbled back from the window. My mind raced. Was I imagining it? Exhaustion? Or had I crossed into something the asylum had always concealed? The building had a history of cruelty, but this felt alive, aware. And I wasn't supposed to exist in its awareness. The faint scuttling of movement caught my attention. From the corner of my eye, shadows darted between walls faster than any human could move. I swung the flashlight, empty, but the air was thick, heavy, charged with expectation. Something had noticed me, something that had waited patient through decades of silence. I descended the stairs quickly, trying to retrace my steps to the exit. The hallways stretched impossibly, corners bending in ways my memory hadn't marked. Doors appeared where none had been before. Shadows pooled in each new angle. The asylum had shifted, or I had shifted in its perception. Either way, the rules of reality seemed suspended. The gates awaited me finally, though the path to them was littered with debris and remnants of the building's past. Discarded syringes, broken furniture, fragmented tiles. The chains were still in place, but as I neared them, I noticed something strange. Scratches in the snow outside, fresh, leading to the side of the building I had entered from. No footprints left by me, but something else had walked here, something with the patience to wait until I arrived. I grabbed the chain and padlock. My hands shook violently. In the corner of my eye, shadows shifted again, merging with the dark tree line. I could feel them observing, aware, calculating. And then, as I pulled the chain free and slipped through the gap, the building exhaled behind me. A low, almost human sigh echoing across the yard. I didn't stop running until the asylum was behind me, swallowed by trees and night. But the memory of the shapes of their awareness stayed with me. They hadn't followed. Not yet, but they had watched, learned, waited. And I knew in some part of my mind I refused to admit that they were patient. Patient for the next curious soul. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see the windows, the shapes lurking just inside, just beyond visibility. The gates may be locked, but the asylum's gaze is open, eternal. And I can't help but wonder who or what will they watch next. The first whisper came from the wall. Not loud, not startling, but deliberate. Soft, uneven, a syllable stretched and broken. I froze, flashlight trembling in my hand. It wasn't wind. The asylum had no ventilation, no life but mine, or so I thought. I pressed my ear to the cracked plaster. Leave it now. Or had it said something else? The voice was fragmented, like it had traveled decades through brick and mortar before reaching me. I jerked back, nearly dropping the light. The beam cut across the hallway, revealing peeling paint and shadows that seemed to bend toward the corners, watching. I moved cautiously, heels scraping concrete. The floor was littered with debris, fragments of furniture, old patient files, shards of glass. I stepped over them, heart hammering. Every surface seemed to hum with history. And then the whispers returned, louder this time, layered, multiple voices pressing in from all sides. I reached a small room, its door hanging at an angle. Inside, the walls were covered with etched lines, almost invisible in the dim light. I crouched to inspect them. Names, dates, short phrases carved deep into the plaster. I can't see him, one line read. Another, he's waiting. My stomach turned. The etchings weren't just writing, they were confessions, pleas, records of fear. Whoever had lived here left fragments of themselves behind. Perhaps some remained, waiting for someone to listen. A thump echoed above me, soft at first, then deliberate. I froze, flashlight scanning the ceiling, the cracked beams, the darkness beyond. Was it a loose board settling, a rat, or something else moving through the floors I had just walked? The room felt smaller suddenly, walls closing in. The whispers grew more insistent, almost conversational. They spoke over one another, phrases blending. He watches, never leaves, help me. Don't go, truth hides, you're next. The sentences collided in my mind, impossible to separate. My pulse rattled in my ears. I turned toward the hallway. Shadows stretched, merged with darkness, then recoiled like they knew I was watching. I followed the wall etched with messages, noticing a pattern. Each confession pointed somewhere, a direction, a warning. The asylum itself seemed to guide me like a sentient map of fear. A drawer in the corner caught my attention. I pulled it open. Inside were scraps of paper, brittle with age, scrawled in hurried hands. One note read, "They don't leave. We only think we do." Another, "The walls remember." They always remember. The words clung to me, refusing to let go. From somewhere deep in the asylum, a floorboard creaked. A rhythm began. Thump, thump, thump. Not footsteps, not human, something heavy, deliberate packing. My flashlight flickered, briefly revealing a dark silhouette at the far end of the hall. I blinked. Nothing. But the sense of being observed pressed against my skull like a hand. I moved forward, drawn by the whispers, compelled despite fear. Every step made the etchings on the walls clearer. Names scratched over names, dates overlapping, cries stacked one atop the other. They took me, he watched. I screamed. No one came. Each word pulsed with history, with the agony of forgotten lives. I entered a narrow corridor where the plaster had crumbled entirely. Behind the decay, I glimpsed shapes, faces, twisted and half-formed, pressed into the shadows. I wanted to turn, to run, but my curiosity pinned me. One face seemed to shift toward me, then vanish. I blinked and it was gone, leaving only a shadow that lingered, aware. A whisper followed me down the hall. You shouldn't be here. I spun, flashlight stabbing at the darkness. The hallway stretched unnaturally, doors appearing where none had existed before. I realized then the asylum wasn't static. It responded. It rearranged itself, folding space, reshaping corridors, reflecting my fear. I was navigating not a building, but a memory, a record of despair. In one room, a chair sat alone, bolted to the floor, a metal armrest twisted. The whispers circled me here, rising and falling like breath. Words surfaced from the plaster. He listens always. The walls remember you. I ran my hand across the scratches. The grooves were deep, jagged, almost accusing. The voices whispered my name this time, my own name. The ceiling above groaned. Dust rained down. I ducked instinctively. Then came a soft scraping like nails along wood. From the corner of my eye, a figure emerged, shadowed and indistinct. It didn't move naturally. It lurched, folding and unfolding as if it existed between moments. My stomach lurched. I stumbled back toward the stairs, trying to retrace my path. The corridor shifted again. A door slammed somewhere behind me. Not wind, something heavier, deliberate. The whispers intensified, overlapping into a chorus. Why are you here? Don't trust the walls. They hide the truth. My flashlight caught the far wall. Etched letters glowed faintly under the beam, though they hadn't been illuminated before. He sees you. He always sees. I shivered, realizing the he from the scraps, the etchings, the whispers might not have been metaphorical. This was something, or someone, that persisted beyond human comprehension, watching, waiting. I reached the main hall where the ceiling had partially collapsed. Moonlight streamed through the broken roof, illuminating debris. The whispers became fragments of sentences I almost understood. They never leave. We are still here. Watch, always behind. The air was thick with presence, pressing down, wrapping around me like invisible chains. I tried to rationalize. Exhaustion, stress, adrenaline. Perhaps the asylum's architecture warped sound and the whispers were echoes of old ventilation systems, footsteps of rats, drafts through broken windows. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something here wasn't mechanical. Something had survived. Something had memorized every corner, every patient, every fear. A sudden knock from the far stairwell startled me. Not a single bang, but a soft, deliberate tap. Tap, tap, tap. My pulse raced. I lifted the flashlight. A figure just beyond my reach vanished as quickly as it appeared. The shadows in the corners didn't recede. They thickened, pulsing with quiet life. I descended toward the exit, whispering, the walls trailing me. Scratches seemed to follow my steps. Go, leave, don't come back. I wanted to believe I was leaving, but the building wasn't finished with me. The echoes, the voices, the shapes, they had learned to anticipate. I felt the walls breathe. The building exhaled around me, hungry and patient. The gates appeared finally, far off in the moonlight. Rusted, imposing, chained. I ran. My boots scuffed against broken concrete, the whispers chasing me down the hallways, wrapping around corners, folding the air with sound. Every shadow seemed to pulse, alive, watching my escape. When I reached the chain and padlock, I paused. Fresh scratches marked the ground leading toward the woods beside the asylum. Not mine, not human. Something had followed. Something had studied me from within. My hands shook as I yanked the chain free. I slipped through the gap and didn't look back. But even as I ran, the whispers didn't stop. They lingered in my ears, in my mind, folded into my heartbeat. I could still feel them pressing, patient, eternal. Names, pleas, warnings, all etched behind walls, behind time. They weren't done. They were waiting. I collapsed at the edge of the tree line, chest heaving. The moon illuminated the asylum, windows dark and hollow, and I knew the truth. It wasn't just the patient's secrets trapped inside. Something else remained, watching, waiting, teaching, and now it had my attention. Even days later, when sunlight fell across my desk, when voices in the newsroom seemed ordinary, I hear fragments of it, whispered syllables from walls that no longer exist. The asylum's memory imprinted on me. Its presence follows, patient and quiet, reminding me I had become part of its record, and perhaps I would never leave. I found the file room by accident. The hallway had twisted, corridors merging like memory itself, and I ended up before a rusted steel door, padlock long broken. The smell hit first, old paper mildew, something coppery underneath like dried blood. My flashlight shook as I pushed the door open. Inside, filing cabinets leaned at impossible angles. Papers spilled across the floor, yellowed and brittle. I stepped carefully, boots crunching on faded folders, and felt the air thicken. Each cabinet seemed to pulse with anticipation, like it had been waiting for me to arrive. The first drawer I opened was labeled simply, Admissions 1972-1975. Inside, files stacked neatly, each with patient names, ages, and reasons for admittance. Most were mundane, anxiety, depression, psychosis. But as I rifled through, I noticed discrepancies, notes scratched in margins, words that didn't belong, dates that made no sense. One file caught my eye. The patient, a woman named Marlene Whitcomb, had been admitted for sleepwalking. But the note said, disappeared from room 14, never found. No record of exit, staff claimed no alarm, my pulse quickened. Disappeared, the word echoed in my mind, never found. And yet here in these files, someone remembered her. I pulled another. This one detailed a man named Harris Cole. According to the paperwork, he had been admitted for severe paranoia. But additional notes, scrawled in uneven handwriting, said, awakened screaming, eyes fixed on corner. Found dead next day, no wounds, no cause. My throat tightened. No cause. And the corner he had stared at, was it empty then, or did it conceal something the records couldn't name? The whispers began again, low, soft. I didn't want to hear them, yet I couldn't turn away. They were comments on my intrusion, observations from beyond. You shouldn't touch this. Leave, they see. I pressed on. Cabinets seemed endless, files branching like veins, each one a fragment of lost lives, a trail of mismanaged humanity or something darker. A folder marked restricted drew me like a magnet. Its edges were frayed, the ink faded. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were sheets with typed reports, but the content was anything but ordinary. Patients had vanished, sometimes after claiming to hear voices, sometimes after reporting shadows in their rooms. Each file ended the same way, case unresolved, patient untraceable, notes filed under pending investigation. I held my breath. The air felt viscous, thickening around me. I couldn't tell if my own pulse or the building's heartbeat was louder. I rifled further, finding photographs taped to files. Faces stared back, some terrified, some blank, some smiling as if caught in a fleeting moment before the world turned on them. One photograph chilled me. A man, eyes hollow, standing in a darkened corridor. The note beneath read, observed by patient, never seen by staff. I backed up, tripping over fallen files. Papers fluttered like leaves in a storm, revealing charts I hadn't noticed before. Heart rates, blood pressure, unusual notes on sleep cycles. Many patients had been subject to enhanced observation, a euphemism that felt far too clinical for what these documents hinted at. Enhanced observation. It sounded benign, sterile, but the words carried the weight of horror. A thump echoed in the room above me. I froze, not random. It had a rhythm. Tap, pause, tap, tap. I realized I was not alone. The room felt alive, the cabinets pressing closer as if the building itself leaned in to listen. I glanced around. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching, folding, sometimes forming shapes that didn't belong. I couldn't tell if my mind was unraveling or the asylum had decided to remind me of its presence. Another folder slid from a leaning cabinet. I caught it midair. Inside were reports on patients who vanished without record, their rooms empty, beds unmade, personal items gone. One report mentioned faint scratches on walls, echoing faint sounds, whispers only the patient could hear. Another said, staff claimed no anomalies. Patient disappeared, security footage lost. The phrase repeated like a mantra. No anomalies, patient disappeared, security footage lost. A soft rustle came from behind the cabinets. I whipped around, flashlight trembling. Nothing. Just the air shifting, dust motes hanging like tiny stars. But I felt its presence. Patient eyes, staff eyes, maybe something else. Something that had watched these disappearances unfold, patient precise. I swallowed hard, forcing my fear down into my stomach. Curiosity had me tethered to this place. I couldn't leave now. Not when the files whispered truths I was only beginning to understand. I found another folder marked in red ink, Experimental Records 1983. The sheets inside were typed clinical. They documented methods, chemical treatment, sleep deprivation schedules, tests on perception. But the footnotes, written in trembling cursive, hinted at consequences. Hallucinations, obsession, patients claiming they were observed from beyond, that the walls themselves had intentions. Notes crossed out sections entirely, leaving empty spaces like memory had been erased. I flipped through photographs in the folder. Some patients were posed, others seemed caught in terror mid-motion. In one image, a shadowy figure lurked just beyond a doorway, barely perceptible yet unmistakable. Typed notes dismissed it as artifact of light. I didn't believe it. Couldn't. Something had been recorded, captured, intended to be seen, but not explained. My flashlight flickered, briefly plunging me into darkness. I steadied it, breathing shallow. When the beam returned, I noticed writing on the back wall. Etched into plaster, faded, barely legible, they all watched. We all disappear. I staggered back, heart racing. The words mirrored the file's warnings. The asylum wasn't just a building. It was a record keeper, a witness, perhaps something more. The whisper came from inside the cabinet I had just examined. Not from the files, not from any vent or crack. Clear, deliberate, you can see. You can't leave. My legs felt leaden. I shook my head, convincing myself this was fatigue, imagination. But even as I rationalized, the feeling persisted. Unseen eyes tracing my every movement, tallying my presence, judging my intrusion. I opened another cabinet at the far end. Inside, folders labeled incident reports 1980-1985. I leafed through them. Each report described strange disappearances, patients vanishing mid-treatment, staff ignoring unusual occurrences, equipment failing without explanation. One entry described a patient who refused to leave a single room, claiming the walls spoke, threatened, observed. Staff dismissed it. The next day, the patient was gone, bed empty, room pristine. The note concluded, no evidence of exit, case closed. I paused, realizing the pattern. These files didn't merely document events, they told a story. A story of unseen forces, something patient, methodical, embedded in the building itself. Whispers, shadows, disappearances, everything converged here. Everything had a witness, and I was now the newest. A loud crash from above made me leap. Dust fell from the ceiling. I spun. Nothing was there. Yet the air felt thicker, heavier. The asylum was breathing around me, folding time and space into corridors that shouldn't exist, records that shouldn't align. My reflection in a cracked window caught my eye, but the face staring back wasn't entirely mine. Shadows clung to the edges, forming shapes that twisted, almost human, almost patient. I shoved folders back into cabinets, trying to leave a semblance of order, but the files seemed to resist. They slid down, fell again, as if the building itself demanded my attention, insisted I understand. I wanted to run. but each revelation tethered me more tightly. Curiosity had become obsession. I found a final drawer at the very back. Its label had faded entirely. Inside were small journals detailed in handwriting I could barely decipher. Each entry described hearing footsteps in empty hallways, shadows that moved on their own, voices that whispered patient secrets. One final note chilled me to the bone. We are never gone. The walls record all. He sees everything. You are here now. I didn't hesitate this time. I closed the drawer, but the sense of observation didn't fade. The building had memorized me, noted my intrusion, recorded my fear. Each file, each etching, each whisper was part of a ledger I now carried in my mind. The asylum was patient. It would wait, and when it chose, it would speak again. I left the room finally, filing cabinets looming like silent sentinels. The hallway stretched before me, corridors bending in impossible angles. I walked faster, but the air was heavy, thick with the presence of all those recorded lives. The whispers faded only slightly, leaving impressions, fragments, warnings. Outside, moonlight caught the asylum's crumbling facade. I paused, drawing in the cold air, trying to shake the knowledge I now carried. But even as I stepped away, the files, the whispers, the shadows, they had imprinted themselves on me. The building was patient, eternal, recording all who dared enter, and I had entered. Even now, the memory lingers. The files, the notes, the faces, they are stitched into my thoughts. Sometimes at night, I hear a whisper behind the walls of my own apartment. You are still here. The asylum doesn't forget. It never does. And I fear that one day it will call me back, patient as ever for what it still wishes to record. I woke to silence that wasn't silence. The air was too still, too expectant. My flashlight had died sometime during the night, and I realized I could hear my own heartbeat bouncing off walls that shouldn't have been there. The asylum had changed again. Hallways that were straight yesterday now twisted like the roots of some enormous tree. Corridors folding in on themselves until I doubted where I had come from, or where I was going. Each step I took echoed, but not quite like mine. A fraction too late, a fraction too soft. It mimicked me. The sound taunted me, testing my nerves. I froze, listening, counting my own footfalls against the echo. Tap, tap, pause, tap, too precise to be coincidence. My skin prickled. I could feel it before I saw it, the presence, a shadow moving just beyond the corner of my vision. Always following, always waiting. I rounded a hallway corner, expecting emptiness. Instead, I found a narrow alcove, walls plastered with peeling paint and scratch marks, almost like fingernails clawed their way into memory. The shadows there weren't random. They stretched unnaturally, leaning toward me, forming shapes that resembled figures. I blinked. When my eyes refocused, nothing remained. I shook my head, telling myself I was exhausted, imagining things. But the echo of my own movement followed, reminding me I wasn't alone. I pressed forward, flashlight in hand, striking weak arcs of light across the walls. Each corner held the suggestion of movement, a twist of shadow that resolved only when I looked directly. Whispers curled at the edges of my hearing, low, teasing. Step carefully, step slowly. We watch. I felt a chill that wasn't entirely from the cold. The building had a rhythm, and I was part of it now. At a junction, the floorboards creaked under my weight, but not beneath my feet. Somewhere behind me, matching my movements perfectly, a second set of creaks echoed in the darkness. I spun around. Nothing. Only the hall stretching impossibly long into darkness, turning back on itself like a Möbius strip. My pulse spiked. This wasn't fatigue. Something was moving with me, perfectly synchronized, unseen but insistent. I found a room marked Records, 1976-1980. The door was ajar, creaking faintly with each draft. Inside, folders lay scattered on the floor. I knelt, rifling through them, hopping for familiar papers, but even the files seemed wrong, edges curling, dates shifting, handwriting morphing under my gaze. Notes that were once legible blurred, then sharpened into something new. Warnings I hadn't noticed before. Do not follow the echoes. They are patient. They wait. The whispers grew louder, layered now, almost forming words I couldn't understand. I spun, trying to locate their source. The hallway behind me seemed longer, darker, bending impossibly. My shadow stretched across the wall, but another shadow moved with it, sharp, angular, human-like. But when I raised my hand, it paused, perfectly synchronized. My own movements reflected back at me in a way that felt deliberate, malevolent. I backed up, scanning the ceiling. Faint markings, tiny scratches, almost like braille, traced intricate patterns. They led toward the hall, guiding me, but toward what? I swallowed hard. My breath fogged in the chill. I realized I had lost track of how long I had been moving, how far, how deep into the asylum I had wandered. The building had a memory of me now, a record of every step, every pause, every misstep. A low thump echoed above me, then another, tap, 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 too precise. The sound followed my movements. I ran a few steps, halting abruptly. The tapping mirrored my motion exactly, never ahead, never behind, always matching. Panic surged, but curiosity anchored me. What or who was following me? What had learned my rhythm so perfectly? The walls began to feel alive. Faint vibrations ran along the plaster, subtle at first, then stronger, like the building exhaling. I traced my fingers along the wall, feeling the faint indents of words etched deep. They move with you. You cannot leave. I shivered. The hall seemed to pulse beneath my hand. Each step echoed, mirrored, magnified. I reached a room at the far end. The door was cracked, the frame splintered. Inside, a mirror leaned against the wall, dusty, almost forgotten. I approached slowly. My reflection stared back, yet something was off. My movements were slightly delayed, almost mocking, mirrored in the wrong rhythm. And then I saw it, behind my reflection, a figure. A shadow that matched me exactly, but impossibly tall, impossibly still. It mimicked me perfectly, down to the slightest tilt of my head. I jumped back. The shadow held. My heart raced. I realized then that the echoes weren't just sound. They were entities, observing, learning, replicating. Each hallway, each corridor had become a lesson in fear. The asylum was teaching me something, something I wasn't ready for. The whispers coalesced into a voice, low and deliberate, almost human. Do you see now? My flashlight flickered. I spun. Nothing. But the sense of being watched intensified, crawling along my skin, settling into my spine. Every corner hid a twin, every shadow a reflection. The asylum had become a hall of mirrors, each movement a test. I ran. The hallways twisted around me, folding like origami. I thought I could lose the mimicry, shake it, but the echoes matched every step. Tap, tap, pause, tap. It was learning me, anticipating me, adapting faster than I could think. Fear clawed at my chest. I realized that leaving wasn't about finding an exit, it was about surviving the rhythm. I skidded to a halt at a junction. The ceiling above me shifted impossibly, walls bending inward. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching toward me like liquid. I raised my flashlight, flicking it across the walls. Figures appeared and vanished, human-like yet distorted, their faces blurred, watching. One shape moved independent of the echoes, a tall, thin form at the end of the hall, observing, waiting. My heart lurched. Was this the source of the mimicry, or a sentinel of the building itself? I stumbled into another room. Dust hung in the air, motes catching in the flashlight beam. Papers littered the floor, some old, some fresh, as though the asylum recorded itself in real time. One folder opened at my feet, charts, notes, photographs. Faces stared up, some terrified, some resigned. One photograph made me freeze. A figure identical to me, standing in the hall, head cocked, observing. The caption read, "He walks again." I couldn't breathe. I realized that the building wasn't just watching, it was cataloging, recording, mimicking, and I had become part of its collection. The walls whispered, shadows moved, echoes followed. I was not alone. I never had been. A sudden silence fell. The echoes stopped. The shadows froze. I dared a glance behind me. The hallway stretched infinitely, dark, empty, or seemingly so. Relief flared briefly, a flicker of hope. But then, from the far corner, movement. A shadow separating from the wall, slithering like liquid, forming a figure that matched me exactly. It stepped forward slowly, perfectly synchronized. My pulse thundered in my ears. I ran again, faster this time, heart hammering. The asylum twisted around me, corridors bending and folding with every turn. Tap, tap, pause, tap. Always matching, always learning. My breath burned, lungs screaming, but the figure stayed perfectly in time, a reflection in motion. Finally, I reached what appeared to be an exit, or a window at least. Moonlight spilled across the floor. I dared to look back. The hallway behind me was empty. The shadows receded. Silence returned. Relief flooded me. I had evaded it for now. But even in the moonlight, the echo lingered. My reflection in the window was not alone. A shadow crouched behind me, stretching, watching, waiting. The building had not released me. It had only paused, and I knew deep in my bones it would not forget. The asylum was patient. It would follow, and I could not escape its rhythm. Even now, in the quiet of my apartment, I hear the faint tap, tap, pause, tap. I move my hand, and somewhere, just out of sight, the mimic moves too. The asylum has marked me. I am cataloged, and one day it will call me back, patient as ever, to complete the record. The night air hit me like a wall the second I burst through the asylum doors. Cold, sharp, and real. My lungs burned, but I kept running, tripping over roots and uneven pavement, heart hammering, each step desperate to put the building behind me. Behind me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it had followed, that it was waiting, patient, biding its time until I slowed down. The flashlight was dead, useless, and the moon offered only faint, fractured light through the skeletal branches. I didn't stop to look for the path. I just ran, boots pounding on wet leaves, arms scraping against low-hanging branches, every sense straining to detect the slightest movement. But even in the dark, I could feel it. The echo, the mimic, that unnatural presence from inside, threading itself into the night air, watching, measuring. I reached the edge of the woods, the gravel road shimmering faintly under the moon. Relief flooded me. The road was straight, predictable. I thought I was safe. And then I saw it, or rather them. Figures flitting just beyond the tree line, shadows that didn't belong to any branch or trunk. They moved like me, mirrored me even from a distance, their steps too deliberate, too precise, a silent countdown that made my stomach knot. I ducked behind a car, chest heaving, trying to slow my breath so I could think. Was it following me, or had I imagined it? My mind clawed at rationality, but the whispers, the mimicry, the infinite corridors, they had taught me that reason had no place here. Even in the open night, the asylum had extended its reach. I forced myself to keep moving. The road stretched ahead, straight, simple, but every shadow along the shoulder seemed alive. Something in my chest tightened, a visceral warning. And then I heard it, a faint sound like the click of a door, subtle but deliberate. My pulse stopped. My head whipped around. The asylum doors, closed when I left, were ajar now. A figure stood there, perfectly still, framed in the threshold. I blinked. My mind swore I had locked the door. I had counted it, turned the handle, pushed it shut. Yet there it was, tall, dark, unyielding, watching. I froze, every instinct screaming to run, but my legs refused. The figure's presence pressed into me, heavy and silent, like gravity had shifted. And then slowly it tilted its head, just slightly, but enough to feel intentional, enough to know I had been seen. I ran again, desperate now. Gravel crunched beneath my feet. Moonlight skittered across the asphalt. My breath came in ragged gasps. Each step echoed, but this time I could feel the echo stretching, reaching for me, like long fingers trying to grab, to pull me back. I forced myself to keep moving, telling myself that distance would be enough, that I could outrun what had tracked me through hallways, shadows, and mirrors. I glanced over my shoulder. The figure didn't move, just remained in the doorway, impossibly still, a sentinel in the dark. And yet I knew it was watching, calculating. The air around it seemed to shimmer, bending the faint moonlight as though reality itself warped at its presence. My stomach twisted. I knew I wasn't safe yet. I wasn't free. The road stretched ahead empty, but my mind refused to accept emptiness. Every rustle, every leaf scraping against another became a whisper, a potential echo. My legs burned, my lungs screamed. And then I heard something else, footsteps, behind me. Not fast, not chasing, but packing me, deliberate, perfectly measured. I didn't look. I couldn't. I just ran, heart hammering, mind screaming to escape before it closed the distance. Finally, I reached the main road, the one leading back to town. Streetlights flickered intermittently. A few houses slept quietly, their windows dark. I thought of screaming for help, but no sound would carry over the night. The world seemed muted, as though the asylum's influence had tainted the air itself. Shadows clung to me, not just in the trees, but in my own peripheral vision, stretching and twisting unnaturally. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Empty road, no figure, no doorway. Relief surged, brief and intoxicating. Maybe I had broken free. Maybe distance had severed the connection. I dared a breathless laugh, shaky but human, and slowed my pace, glancing at familiar landmarks, marking myself closer to safety. Then I saw movement in a window. Not a tree, not a person. A shape tall and dark, still watching me. In a house I knew to be abandoned. My blood froze, my mind recoiled. The figure in the doorway hadn't left. It had simply relocated, moving with the precision of some predator that knew I would look away. I felt my chest tighten, a cold, creeping terror. I had run, yes, but escape had become a trap I didn't understand yet. I forced myself to keep moving, head down, eyes forward. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward me, reaching with intent. My boots hit the pavement, echoing, and each step felt like a countdown. Was it behind me? Ahead? In the houses? I didn't dare look. Every instinct screamed that I had been seen before, and that visibility didn't guarantee safety. The road twisted, familiar now, yet strangely distorted. Street signs seemed warped, houses angled wrong. I shook my head, telling myself exhaustion was making me hallucinate. But the echo of that doorway, that figure, clung to my memory like a shadow that would not let go. My breath shuddered. I realized the asylum wasn't just a place. It was a presence, sprawling, patient, capable of reaching beyond walls. I stumbled into a small park, hoping to lose it, to hide until dawn. The grass was wet, slick underfoot. Trees loomed, their branches like black fingers against the sky. I crouched behind a bench, heart pounding, listening. Silence. The moonlight glinted off something in the distance. A figure, yes, moving slowly, almost lazily, yet every motion mirrored mine. I clenched my fists. It had tracked me here. It had followed every step. Escape was an illusion. A dog barked somewhere distant, sharp, breaking the oppressive quiet. For a moment I allowed myself relief, but it dissolved instantly when the figure paused, turning its head toward the sound. Awareness, intelligence, calculation. It wasn't a mindless shadow. It was deliberate, and it knew I was afraid. I forced myself to my feet, moving cautiously toward the edge of the park, toward streets that would lead me to light, people, safety. My steps were careful now, measured. I didn't want it to know I saw it, but the air shifted again. That cold, unnatural pressure pressed down, and then from the corner of my eye, movement in the tree line. A branch bending, leaves shifting, shadows pooling into the unmistakable silhouette. I sprinted, reckless now, abandoning caution. Gravel, pavement, wet leaves, nothing mattered, only distance. The figure remained, always at the periphery, always watching, its presence a constant, oppressive weight. The asylum had extended its reach, a tether I couldn't sever. Each glance back reminded me, freedom was conditional, temporary, and the price of looking away was certainty that it would catch me. Finally, I reached the town limits, lights spilling into the night, houses, streets, normalcy. Relief surged like a tidal wave. Maybe I had broken the tether. Maybe it would retreat. I slowed, daring to breathe, listening for pursuit. Silence. For a heartbeat, maybe two, I believed I had escaped. Then I dared one last glance over my shoulder. The asylum doors were far behind, just as I remembered. And yet in the doorway, unmistakable, framed against the darkness, stood a figure. Tall, human-shaped, perfectly still. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't hallucinated it. The door had been closed, locked, sealed. And still there it was, watching, waiting, smiling, or perhaps just tilting its head in that deliberate, mocking way. I didn't look away. I couldn't. I felt my chest tight, heart hammering, mind screaming at the impossibility. Escape had been an illusion. Distance meant nothing. The asylum had marked me, claimed me. I realized with a cold certainty that it would follow me beyond walls, beyond streets, beyond reason itself. The tether was eternal. I backed away slowly, forcing my mind to focus, to plan, to survive. I needed witnesses, light, proof, any kind of barrier between me and that impossible figure. But even as I turned, I knew it had seen me, cataloged me, understood me. My freedom was conditional, temporary. And the moment I paused, the moment I thought I was safe, it would move. It would strike, or wait, always wait. I fled into the night, knowing that the figure would remain, an unblinking sentinel, a warning. Escape had brought me here, but it had not freed me. And as I ran, the thought gnawed at me, relentless. Maybe the asylum wasn't a place at all. Maybe it was a state of mind. Maybe it was me. And maybe it would always be waiting. I arrived at Red Oak long after the last whistle had faded into the hills. The station was supposed to be empty at this hour, abandoned for decades. Yet the platform sat there, gleaming under the weak glow of the flickering lanterns, as if someone had swept it just yesterday. Not a paper, not a bottle, just polished wood and silent benches. It made no sense. The train I had been following, late, delayed, forgotten, was nowhere in sight. And yet the rails stretched straight into shadow, dark and perfect, vanishing into the black hills. I felt my stomach tight. Something about this place whispered wrongness. I had walked abandoned stations before, seen decay and rust, but Red Oak looked untouched, frozen, almost alive. I stepped onto the platform. The wood groaned faintly under my boots. I glanced at the clock hanging above the ticket office. Its hands spun backward slowly, a subtle, nauseating motion I almost missed. A train was supposed to arrive in an hour. Now, time itself seemed off, unsteady. I shook my head. Maybe exhaustion was twisting perception, but the stillness of the platform didn't lie. A cold wind drifted through, though no doors were open. It carried faint smells, coal, old leather, faint perfume, and something else. Something metallic, bitter. I inhaled sharply. The air felt thick, almost viscous, pressing against my lungs. My flashlight barely cut through the dark, and the shadows stretched long, like black fingers over the edges of the platform. I moved closer to the ticket booth, noticing for the first time the signs of life that shouldn't have been there. Tiny footprints, wet, pressed into the dustless floorboards, led from the rails to the far side of the platform. Too small for an adult. I knelt to examine them. The prints stopped abruptly, as if whoever or whatever had made them vanish mid-step. My heart thumped and a part of me whispered to leave, but curiosity rooted me in place. The benches gleamed, each polished plank reflecting the dim lanterns. I ran my hand along one, feeling the varnish smooth, almost warm, as though it had been handled recently. My fingers trembled. How could a station abandoned for decades feel this alive? My mind searched for logic, but nothing fit. Even the ticket machines hummed faintly, a soft mechanical breath in the silence. I walked toward the far end of the platform, scanning the tracks. Shadows pooled at the edges, deep and impossible. Every step seemed to echo twice, once in sound, once in sensation. The first echo was normal, the second, wrong. It felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone behind me. I froze. Nothing moved. No train, no figure, no wind. But the second echo remained, faint and mocking. Then I noticed the station walls. Perfect white brick, unbroken by weather or time. And etched into them, subtle at first, were words. Names, dates, and tiny messages. Faded carvings of someone's existence. Waited for you, don't forget me. The train comes soon. My stomach dropped. These weren't recent. They were decades old, yet somehow crisp, fresh, as if the walls themselves were remembering, recording, breathing. I felt the temperature drop, my breath misting in front of me. A distant sound, a chime like a bell swinging in slow motion, reached my ears. I turned, scanning the tracks. No bell, no train, no movement. But the air vibrated with a rhythm, steady, deliberate. It wasn't mechanical, it was something else, something patient, watching, waiting. I took a cautious step forward. The lanterns flickered violently. Shadows surged like dark water over the benches and walls. The carved words on the walls seemed to shift when I looked away, letters realigning, forming new sentences. You shouldn't have come. My stomach lurched. I spun toward the tracks, expecting something, anything, to explain this. The rails were empty, but the air felt thick, heavy, electric. A soft hiss came from the tunnel at the far end of the platform. I froze. My flashlight flickered, struggling against a darkness that seemed almost physical. Then the hiss became a whisper, faint, repeating, "Don't leave, don't leave, don't leave." My heart thudded violently. I shook my head. I wasn't imagining it. Whispers curled around me, brushing my ears like cold fingers. I turned in a slow circle. Nothing. Only shadows deepening with each second. I moved toward the tunnel entrance, compelled by curiosity I couldn't rationalize. The platform stretched unnaturally, longer than it should have been. Steps echoed far behind me, though no one followed. My pulse raced. The air grew colder, the whispers louder, forming words that danced just beyond comprehension. Names, dates, fragments of stories that had no right to exist here, spoken by voices that had no right to be alive. A lantern above the tunnel swung wildly, casting the tracks into sharp light and deep shadow. And then I saw it, a train. Silent, motionless, its metal gleaming as though polished every night. Smoke curled lazily from nowhere, smelling faintly of iron and ash. Its windows were black, reflective, showing not the interior but fragments of my own face, twisted, watching, judging. My reflection blinked once, but I didn't. The doors hissed open with no sound of machinery. I knew I shouldn't step forward. Every instinct screamed to run, yet my feet carried me closer. The whispers intensified, now pleading, "Come aboard, come aboard, come aboard." Each word struck a chord in my chest, deep and impossible to ignore. I realized then that the train wasn't waiting for a schedule. It was waiting for me. I stepped onto the first car. The floorboards were flawless, polished wood that made no sound under my weight. A faint warmth emanated from the walls, inviting, seductive. The car was empty, pristine. Seats lined up in perfect rows, each angled to face the tracks outside. Yet through the windows, the world beyond was distorted. Trees bent at impossible angles. Stars flickered, some in reverse. Time itself seemed unsteady. I moved down the aisle. Each step echoed differently, long, hollow, as though multiple people walked behind me in tandem, unseen. The whispering followed, now in unison, a chorus of long-gone passengers whose lives had been erased, or perhaps trapped here. I couldn't understand their words fully, only fragments. Lost, trapped, waiting, leave. I reached the last car. The door at the end was closed, unlike the others. It seemed solid, impossibly thick, yet I felt it pulsate, breathing alive. The whispers focused there, urgent now, frantic. "Open, open, open." My hands trembled as I reached for the handle. Cold, bone-deep cold seeped into my fingers, climbing my arms. I hesitated. What was behind that door? And then a sound, metal clinking, faint, deliberate, came from above. I froze. The ceiling panels weren't straight. They curved, twisted subtly, bending the car into angles my eyes couldn't fully process. Shadows pooled in impossible shapes, merging, separating, forming figures that weren't there one second and solid the next. My mind strained to comprehend, to rationalize. I pulled the door open. A sudden gust of wind, or something like it, rushed past me. The whispers became screams, incoherent, overlapping. The interior beyond the door was a void, blacker than night, yet pulsing with light that seemed alive. Shapes moved within, silhouettes of people frozen in mid-motion, twisted, contorted. Faces pressed against some invisible barrier, eyes wide, mouths open in silent horror. I stumbled back, heart racing, breath ragged. The door slammed shut behind me, though I hadn't touched it. The train seemed to breathe, vibrating softly beneath my feet. I realized then that the station itself had shifted, the platform longer, the rails bending subtly, guiding me in, shaping me, drawing me deeper into something I couldn't name. I turned toward the exit. The doors were gone. The platform extended infinitely, empty benches glinting in the cold lantern light. No sound of the outside world remained. I was not alone. The air thickened and the whispers returned, insistent, circling me from every direction. Every carved message on the walls now glowed faintly, pulsing with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. You came, you came, you came. I stumbled forward, desperate, but the farther I went, the farther the exit seemed. The platform stretched endlessly, bending space, defying reason. And somewhere deep in the blackness, I heard the faint hiss of the train doors opening again. ready, patient, eternal. I realized then, Red Oak wasn't abandoned. It had never been abandoned. It was waiting for someone like me. And no matter what I did, no matter how far I ran, it would not let go. The platform was silent when I returned, or at least I thought it was. The lanterns glowed dimly, but the air itself seemed to thrum. I hadn't expected the station to change so much in a few hours. I shouldn't have expected anything anymore. I walked along the edge of the platform, boots scraping the polished wood. That's when I heard it, a faint conversation, hushed and distant, coming from the far end near the rails. Words too soft to understand, but unmistakably human. Two voices, perhaps more, murmuring in a language I couldn't place. My chest tight. I spun around. No one was there. The tracks stretched into darkness, empty, unbroken. I forced myself forward, compelled by curiosity and a creeping dread I couldn't name. The whispers grew louder as I approached the rows of old luggage piled neatly against a wall. I froze. One suitcase had shifted, just a little, enough to tilt to the side as if nudged by invisible fingers. My mind raced. Was this a trick of perspective, a draft? The night air was still. The air here never moved. Yet each piece of luggage leaned, rotated, adjusted subtly, almost consciously as I watched. I reached out a hand. The suitcase trembled under my touch. My skin prickled. Each suitcase held a weight, not of clothes, but of memory, of presence. I could feel them. Something pressed against me through the straps and leather, through dust and decay, as if the things themselves remembered who had carried them. And then I heard it more clearly, the voices, not from the tracks, but from inside the luggage. I staggered back. A small trunk creaked open on its own. Inside, neatly folded clothing from decades past lay still. But there was something else. A note yellowed with age, a single word etched in careful, looping handwriting. Wait. My pulse throbbed. Was it a warning or an invitation? Both felt equally true. I glanced along the platform. The benches, the lanterns, the walls, they all seemed to lean toward me, subtle, almost imperceptible movements. The whispers wove around my head, coming closer, circling me. I strained to hear a name, a sentence, a clue. My own name came back to me, twisted in voices not my own. He is here. He came. My stomach lurched. The platform knew I was here. It had always known. I edged toward the tracks. The rails gleamed black, stretching into the void. Between the rails, shadows moved, or so I thought. One second the ties were empty, the next, a figure crouched low, impossibly thin, face hidden, watching. I blinked. Gone. My eyes darted around. Every time I thought I understood the space, it shifted, rearranging itself, just enough to unbalance my perception. I leaned against a bench to steady myself. The whispers had grown into fragmented phrases. Did you see him? Not yet. He must wait. My chest tightened, each inhale shallow. I felt the station itself pressing in, walls bending imperceptibly, the platform stretching and compressing in rhythm with my heartbeat. My mind screamed that something had followed me back, something patient, something aware. Another suitcase rattled nearby. Slowly, deliberately, it rolled toward the edge of the platform. Not with gravity, not with air currents, but as if drawn by intention. I stepped back, heart hammering. Each suitcase now moved slightly when I looked away, shifting subtly, rearranging themselves like the station was alive and conscious. And the whispers, they responded to me. I whispered questions, half in fear, half in disbelief. Who's there? The voices answered immediately. We wait, we wait, we wait. I wanted to leave. Every instinct screamed it, yet my feet rooted to the platform. There was something here, something that had waited decades, and it wanted me to understand. I tried to reason it out. Luggage doesn't move by itself. Voices don't echo in empty stations. There had to be some rational explanation, but every rational thought clashed with the evidence of my senses. A figure appeared at the far end just for a second. A man in a conductor's uniform, faded and torn, face blank. He raised a hand in greeting, then vanished, leaving a hollow echo of steps. I blinked. I wasn't sure if I'd seen him or if my mind had conjured a memory of something it had feared. I stepped toward where he had been. The whispers changed tone, urgent now, overlapping, chaotic. Do not follow, do not follow, do not follow. My flashlight caught a name carved into the platform beam. Eleanor, 1923. The letters glowed faintly, pulsing as if alive. I traced the name with my finger. A cold rush ran up my arm. Beneath it, smaller words scratched almost invisibly. She waits, still waits. The whispers became coherent in fragments. Left the train, couldn't leave, came back. My stomach churned. Stories of the lost, the trapped, all converging here. The station shifted subtly again. I spun. The luggage had gathered in the center of the platform now, forming a rough circle, as if congregating around something unseen. Shadows flickered within the circle, stretching tall and thin, pressing against the edges of my vision. I felt pulled toward it, drawn by an invisible gravity, by whispers that had taken on the tone of command. See, learn, remember. I approached cautiously. The circle of luggage quivered slightly. From within, the faint outline of a face appeared on the largest trunk. Pale, hollow eyes. The whispers erupted into a chorus of voices, overlapping and urgent. Do not open. Do not touch. Open. My mind recoiled. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet moved forward anyway. Compelled by a curiosity I couldn't resist. A hand, faintly visible, emerged from the trunk, thin and almost transparent. I froze. The whispers converged into a single word, join. My chest tightened violently. I realized the luggage wasn't just alive. It was a doorway, a vessel, a memory trapped and reaching outward, waiting to pull me in. My pulse raced. I turned abruptly, thinking I could leave, but the platform had changed. The lanterns now hovered at eye level, stretching across the platform like the ribs of some massive creature. The exit had shifted, gone. I ran. Each step felt like pushing against invisible resistance. The whispers followed, now shouting in fragmented sentences. He came. He must stay. Do not leave. I leapt over a suitcase, stumbled past a bench that suddenly rose to block my path, and the shadows stretched to grab at my heels. The platform bent under my weight, elongating impossibly, stretching the distance to the tunnel. I reached the edge of the tracks and stopped. Ahead, the train waited silently, black and empty. Behind, the platform twisted impossibly, corners folding, edges disappearing into darkness. The whispers had grown to a roar inside my mind. You can't leave. You can't leave. You can't leave. I wanted to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. I could feel the station breathing, inhaling me, waiting for me to falter. I turned to face the luggage circle one last time. The faces inside the trunks were clear now. Pale, distorted, endless. They reached outward, hands pressing against invisible walls, eyes desperate. The whispers softened, almost mournful. He came, he sees, remember. My legs gave way beneath me. The platform beneath seemed to pulse with their collective heartbeat, dragging me down toward the circle, toward understanding I wasn't ready for. I scrambled back to the tunnel, sliding over polished boards slick with something I didn't want to name. The train loomed silently ahead. The doors were open, empty, but inviting. The whispers changed tone, coaxing now, soothing. Step inside, it is ready. It has waited. My chest heaved, my mind screamed to run. But where could I go? Every path bent back to the platform. Every shadow, every whisper, every moving suitcase was focused on me. I stumbled aboard the train. The moment I crossed the threshold, the platform outside shifted violently. Lanterns spun like storm lanterns, shadows twisting into impossible shapes. The luggage circle collapsed, scattering silently, then vanished entirely. Only the faint glow of carved names remained, pulsing softly, marking memories I would never forget. Inside the train, the air was warmer. I sank into a seat, trembling. The whispers had faded to a murmur, distant but persistent. He came, he waits, he remembers. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to calm my racing mind. But the feeling persisted, eyes on me, waiting, watching. I realized then that the station hadn't been empty. It had been patient, observing, and now I was part of it. I didn't know if I would ever leave Red Oak, but I knew one thing: the voices on the tracks would never stop. They would follow me, echo in my mind, and the luggage, wherever it had gone, had carried a piece of me with it. Something had waited for me here, and it was not done. I found the ledger in a narrow closet beneath the platform stairs, shoved behind bundles of forgotten cleaning rags. Its leather cover was cracked, soft from age, and the lock had rusted into uselessness. I hesitated before lifting it. Something about the weight of it in my hands felt wrong, as if it contained more than ink and paper. The first page was neat, almost clinical, columns of names, dates, destinations. The handwriting changed from careful cursive to frantic scrawls halfway down. My eyes froze on a single column, status, never arrived. I blinked, flipped back a page, another. After the first dozen names, every entry was the same, never arrived. My stomach sank. How many had come here, boarded trains that never reached their stops? I traced the inked letters with trembling fingers. The names seemed familiar, though I couldn't place them. Children, men, women, elders. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all recorded with clinical detachment. Some dates were decades old, some just a year ago. I could almost feel the weight of the absence behind each name, a void that had traveled along the rails unseen. A sound made me snap the ledger closed, a soft shuffling behind the platform benches. I turned. Nothing, the air was still, but the rustle persisted, subtle, deliberate. Old newspaper pages, luggage tags, something brushing against the wood. I stepped toward it, heart hammering. Another shuffle, and then voices. Not whispers this time, but fragments of conversations. Snippets of laughter, cries, arguments, faint, like they were trapped inside the station walls, leaking through. My pulse pounded in time with their echoes. I bent over the ledger again. One name caught my eye, Thomas Harlan, 1964. I remembered that name. A news clipping I had seen years ago, a missing man. And now his name was here, in a ledger no one else seemed to know existed. The voices intensified. They weren't outside, they weren't in the distance. They were all around me, threading through the wooden beams, through the air, through my skin. I could almost feel them brushing against my back, breathing alongside me. I swallowed hard and forced myself to read again. Each entry, each never arrived, now felt like a presence pressing from the page, tugging me into their absence. I flipped to a section at the back. This one was different. Names crossed out with heavy, uneven strokes. Some had notes scribbled next to them. Found, gone before dawn, or boarded, vanished mid-journey. The handwriting was frantic, sometimes indecipherable. One note chilled me to my bones. The train is patient. They always arrive. My eyes shot up, scanning the platform. Shadows lengthened unnaturally under the lantern light, twisting like they were responding to the ledger, aware of what I now held. A sudden movement near the tracks made me jerk. The rails were empty, but the faint echo of footsteps, my own, but delayed, as if someone walked behind me with a pause I couldn't account for. I spun, empty, and yet I felt watched, felt the brush of invisible eyes tracing my every move. The ledger's weight in my hands became unbearable, as if it wanted to be read by me and no one else, and yet I couldn't look away. The entries continued, names stacking atop names, the pattern repeating until it felt infinite. I began to notice something else, odd dates repeated in irregular cycles. Every few decades, clusters of disappearances. I tried to piece it together in my mind. Trains leaving the station, passengers boarding, then never arriving. Something about the rhythm of it felt deliberate, ritualistic even. My hands shook as I wrote a few of the names and dates down, my fingers sticky with sweat. I leaned back against the platform bench, trying to steady my breath. That's when I noticed the luggage again. The same ones I had seen before. They hadn't moved, at least not yet, but I could feel their presence, heavy and aware. The whispers from last night returned. Soft but insistent, circling my ears. He sees, he knows, he must learn. My pulse raced. Was it the station itself, alive and watching, or something older feeding on the disappeared? I returned to the ledger. Some names had additional notations, strange codes, letters I didn't recognize, symbols interspersed with the handwriting. I squinted. They were repeated across years, across decades, almost like a warning or a signature. I traced one symbol with a fingertip. A chill ran through me. The whispers shifted into murmurs of recognition. Yes, he notices, he remembers. The platform changed subtly around me. I blinked. A bench had shifted, the lantern seemed higher, the shadows longer. The aisle between luggage piles narrowed, guiding me in one direction. I stumbled forward, clutching the ledger. The air grew thick, suffocating, each breath dragging as if the station itself resisted my movement. The whispers pressed closer. Do not leave. Not yet. Not yet. I realized the ledger was more than a record. It was a map, a memory, a trap. Each name a tether, each date a pull. I could feel the invisible threads wrapping around my consciousness, urging me to see, to understand, to join. The voices shifted again, now imitating the passengers themselves. Faint snippets of last words, cries for help, quiet conversation, laughter that never reached the ears of the living. My stomach turned. I pressed the ledger to my chest, hoping it would shield me. But it pulsed with energy, radiating awareness, radiating patience. I had to leave. I had to put the ledger back. I backed toward the closet, footsteps echoing unnaturally long, almost delayed. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting toward me like they were watching me make my escape. And then I saw movement near the far end of the platform, a figure standing perfectly still. At first I thought it was a man, maybe another conductor. Then it moved impossibly with my own gait, mirroring my every step. Hard in my throat, I froze. The whispers coalesced into a single sentence. Do not hide. You are one of us now. I spun, lunged back to the closet. The ledger fell open on the floor, pages fluttering as if catching a breeze that didn't exist. I snatched it up and slammed it closed. The figure was gone, but the feeling lingered, curling around my mind like smoke. I could still hear footsteps echoing behind me, slower now, deliberate, following, waiting. The platform stretched out, the walls subtly leaning, the lanterns dimming. I shoved the ledger back into its hiding place, forcing the closet door closed. It wouldn't stay hidden. I could feel it. Every fiber of the station hummed with awareness, like it resented my interference but allowed it for now. The whispers softened, resigned, fading into the background, though I knew they would never truly leave me. He knows. He must remember. He cannot forget. I stepped back onto the platform. The lanterns flickered. The benches returned to their original positions. The air cleared slightly, though it still bore the weight of decades. The smell of dust and old wood mingled with something metallic, faintly coppery. I breathed deep. Relief was fleeting. I could feel it in my bones, the ledger, the station, the lost passengers. They were all still here, waiting, watching, patient. I left the platform, but the ledger stayed with me in thought. Every name haunted the corners of my mind, each, never arrived, echoing in silent corridors of memory. I had uncovered a truth too vast to understand, too heavy to bear. Something had claimed these people, these trains, these stations, and it had left a trail. And now, somehow, I was on it. Even as I walked away, the whispers returned, faint but certain. He sees, he remembers, he will come back. My chest tightened. I knew I would. I had to. The ledger was not just a record, it was an invitation. And the station was patient. It always waits. The phone never stopped ringing that night. Every time I picked it up, there was nothing, just a stretched-out silence that felt heavier than quiet should. But then faintly, there would be a sound. A whisper, a scream, something that was almost a person, almost a warning. I slammed the receiver down once, then picked it up again. My fingers were shaking, but I couldn't let it go. It always came from the same exchange, a part of town nobody went to anymore. Abandoned streets, crumbling houses, street lamps that hadn't worked for decades. I had driven past it before, late at night, wondering who would still live there. No one. And yet the calls kept coming. I tried tracing them, but the lines were dead. Silent, empty wires. And still I felt it, like something was trying to reach me through the receiver. The first scream came almost silently, a breathy, gurgling sound that made my chest tight. It wasn't long enough to be a voice, not long enough to tell a story, but long enough to leave a mark. My mind kept filling in what it couldn't hear. Someone trapped, someone hurt, someone alone in the dark, screaming because no one could see them. I pressed the hold button and listened. More static, more silence. And then another sound, a whisper. Help, just for a heartbeat. I leaned back in my chair, listening to the empty room. My office was small, dimly lit, walls lined with maps and dispatch logs, the faint hum of fluorescent lights above. Nothing moved, yet the silence carried weight. It made me feel like I was breathing underwater. Another call came in. I snatched it up. No one, but the faint, impossibly faint clicking, like footsteps on broken concrete. My ears strained, my chest ached. I tried recording it, played it back. Nothing. Just the static, the hiss of the line, and that brief, incomprehensible sound. A scream, a laugh, a cry. It wasn't like anything I had heard before. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was imagining it. But then the dispatcher's monitor flickered, tiny blips of movement. A reflection of someone I couldn't see. And the line clicked. Just a short, dry click before silence swallowed everything again. By the third hour, I couldn't tell if I was awake or still imagining it. My own heartbeat was loud in my ears, drumming along with the pulses of static on the line. I glanced at the maps. The abandoned sector was outlined in red on some old reports. Empty streets, abandoned buildings, a long-forgotten rail yard. I stared at the map, imagining myself walking the streets at night, imagining what I would see or hear. Then faintly I did. On the next call, the faintest scratch like nails on brick came through the line. I froze, listened. It didn't move like an animal, not like the wind. It moved with intent. Slow, deliberate, creeping closer and further away. My hands shook as I held the phone. I wanted to hang up, wanted to run, wanted to forget all of it, but I couldn't. Another sound, soft crying layered under the scratches, under the faint mechanical hum of the exchange. I leaned forward, eyes scanning the dark office, listening for any hint of motion. But I was alone, or maybe I was. Maybe it was here, somewhere in the lines, in the dead wires, in the shadows behind the walls. The more I listened, the more it felt like the building itself was waiting, watching, breathing with me. I picked up the phone again, silence, and then suddenly a word. Not a whisper, not a scream, just a single word stretched and broken by static. Stay. My hands trembled. My throat went dry. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but the line kept buzzing, impatient. Another word, this time almost like a threat. Wait. My skin prickled. Every instinct screamed to ignore it, but I couldn't. I pulled the old radio from the desk, switched channels, hopping for a crackle, a signal, anything to break the silence. Static. The faintest footstep, like someone packing just out of sight. I froze, counted the beats. My pulse matched theirs. I realized slowly, with growing dread, that the sound was mimicking me. My own movements echoed through the wires. Every scratch, every step, every turn of my head was tracked, followed, matched. I leaned back in my chair, trying to make sense of it. Could a line do this? Could wires carry more than sound? Could it carry intent? And then it clicked again, the familiar dry click. But this time it wasn't on the line. It came from the corner of the room. My head whipped around. Nothing. Only shadows folding into themselves, but I felt it. A presence. Silent, patient, waiting for me to understand or to fail. The calls kept coming, one after another, faster now, layered. Whispers, scratches, cries. I tried recording everything, but the files came back corrupted. Notes vanished. Names I wrote down turned into scribbles. I began to wonder if the building, or whatever it was, could see what I wrote, could erase it, could change it. I pressed my palms to my face, hoping it was fatigue, that it was me. But I knew it was. Then one call broke the pattern. Silence as usual, but beneath it faint enough that I almost missed it, a child's voice. Clear, desperate, repeating one word over and over. Home. My breath caught. I leaned in closer. The line hummed. The shadows in the room shifted. And then the voice added another layer, an echo underneath it. Not yet, not yet. I felt the hair on my arms rise. The office grew colder, the shadows darker. My chair creaked under the weight of something unseen pressing against the back. I spun, expecting movement, a person, anything, but the room remained still, empty, silent, except for the phone, which was alive with whispers that didn't come from any human mouth. I traced the wires to the old switchboard, thinking maybe there was a line, a connection, something I could unplug. But the switches moved on their own, flipping as I approached, each one accompanied by a soft click. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and then the lights flickered, one lamp, two lamps. The whole office plunged into darkness for a heartbeat, then returned. Everything seemed the same, nothing moved, and yet I knew it had been there, watching me, testing me. I sat down, exhausted, and held the phone. Silence again, and then just beneath it, almost imperceptible, a sigh. Long, patient, disappointed. My own sigh caught in my throat. I felt it in my chest, heavy, slow, deliberate. The kind of sigh that comes from a presence older than the building, older than the town, older than me. Something that had been waiting all along. I tried to convince myself to leave, to lock the office and never return. But I knew the calls wouldn't stop. I knew it wouldn't let me go. Each whisper, each scratch, each faint scream from the abandoned streets had a purpose. It wanted me to listen, to understand, or maybe to witness. My fingers tightened on the receiver. My own heartbeat was loud, louder than the static. And through it all, the line whispered again. You came, you see, now you stay. I realized in that moment that the calls were not random. They were a lure, a trap, a bridge. Something or someone was using the wires to reach me, to pull me closer to the abandoned sector, to where no one returned. And I knew deep down that if I followed, I wouldn't just be listening anymore. I would be part of the silence, part of the waiting, part of the cries that never reached anyone. I put the receiver down. My hands shook so hard I could barely touch the desk. The office felt smaller now, tighter, walls pressing in. The shadows weren't shadows anymore, they were shapes, leaning, waiting. I wanted to run, but every instinct that screamed to leave was mirrored by a voice on the line, whispering, coaxing, patient. Come closer, don't be afraid, we've been waiting. I didn't move for a long time. Listen, the city outside was quiet. The abandoned sector waited, untouched, unseen. The phone remained silent now, but I knew it would ring again. I knew the whispers were patient, persistent. I knew the cries of the lost would reach me over and over until I answered, until I followed, until I became part of the waiting. And deep down, I knew I would. I drove into the abandoned sector just past midnight, headlights cutting through fog that smelled like wet concrete and rust. The roads were empty, too empty. Streetlights flickered above me, throwing shadows that didn't match the shapes of the houses. I slowed, gripping the wheel, heart hammering in a rhythm that seemed to sync with the lights. One moment, a tree cast a shadow across the street. The next, it was gone. My eyes snapped from side to side, trying to catch the shift. It wasn't the fog, it was something else. Something watching. The houses loomed silently, windows dark or cracked, doors hanging from crooked hinges. I knew no one had lived here for years, yet the smell of burning wood lingered, faint and sickly sweet. I rolled the window down. The cold air rushed in, bringing with it the faintest echo of laughter, or was it crying? I couldn't tell. I told myself it was the wind, that I was imagining it. But the sound followed me as I drove further, just out of reach, always ahead. Streetlights stuttered above, flickering in irregular patterns. One second the road was clear, the next the asphalt shimmered like it had been washed with water, reflecting shapes I didn't recognize. I blinked. A shadow moved across the street, slow, deliberate, but there was no one there. I gripped the wheel tighter, forcing myself to breathe. The radio in the car sputtered static, then whispered faintly. Closer. I slammed the knob off. No one was listening, I told myself. No one could be. I stopped at the first house. Paint peeled like dead skin, windows black as night. The door was cracked. I stepped out, boots crunching on broken glass and dry leaves. The air smelled different here, sharp, metallic, like iron and wet stone. I circled the house. Every shadow seemed to twitch when I wasn't looking. Behind me, the fog thickened, curling around street lamps, moving like smoke with a mind of its own. A laugh, muffled, almost childish, bounced from wall to wall. My stomach tightened. I tried the front door. Locked, but the faint sound of movement inside, footsteps, sliding floorboards, made me step back. The house had been empty for decades, I knew it. And yet the presence inside was undeniable. A pulse, almost alive, vibrating against my chest. I glanced around. The street was still empty, but I felt eyes. Millions of them, staring from the dark, from behind the flickering lights, from the shadows where walls met fog. I got back in the car. My hands shook so badly I could barely turn the key. The engine caught, sputtered, then roared. I drove slowly down the street. House after house, the same story, empty, abandoned. Yet the signs of someone or something having been there were everywhere. Doors ajar, furniture shifted slightly, papers scattered in windless yards. My headlights caught glimpses of shapes just beyond the fog, standing still, watching, disappearing when I tried to focus. At the corner, a streetlight flickered violently, casting the entire road into darkness for a heartbeat. When the light returned, I swore the house at the end of the block had moved closer. My vision tricked me. It couldn't have. Houses don't move. I slammed on the brakes. Fog pressed against the windshield like fingers. I pressed my face to the glass. The house was farther back now. Yet the front door was wide open, a dark rectangle that wasn't there before. A sound inside the car made me jump. My phone vibrated on the seat. A message. No number, no name, just a single line, "You see us." My fingers went icy. I tried to call back. No signal. Nothing. Only the faint echoes of footsteps in the fog. I backed up, eyes scanning the street, heart hammering. That same laugh or scream followed me down the road, bouncing between the houses, coming closer as I tried to escape. I drove faster. Fog swallowed the road, swallowed the streetlights. The houses became walls, pressing in from both sides. I tried to turn onto a side street. Dead end. Another street. Dead end. I realized with a sinking dread that the layout was wrong. Roads I had seen on the map didn't exist here. Streets twisted at impossible angles. A corner that should have led me out of the sector looped back to the same empty house with the open door. I parked in the middle of the street. Headlights cutting through the fog, my pulse loud enough to drown out the silence. I stepped out, boots crunching, listening. The fog shifted. A figure emerged at the end of the road. No features, just a dark shape standing perfectly still. I squinted, trying to make it out. Then it moved, or I moved, and it mirrored me. Every step, every tilt of my head, every nervous glance over my shoulder, the figure mirrored. I froze. My brain screamed that this was impossible. My eyes darted around. No wind, no mirrors, no reflective surfaces. And yet the figure followed, mimicked, watched. I realized I hadn't felt alone for a long time. The street was empty, but I was never by myself here, not for a second. And the more I realized it, the closer it felt. A pressure, a pull, like the fog itself was alive, moving to guide me toward it. I stumbled back into the car, locked the doors. Engine roared. My hands gripped the wheel as the figure remained at the end of the street. Not moving forward, not retreating, just waiting. Then, without warning, the headlights illuminated another shadow, this one inside the fog beside the car. I swerved violently. Nothing. Just fog curling around the tires. My heartbeat thumped so loud I could hear it over the roar of the engine. The map on my phone flickered. Signal returned for a heartbeat. Red dots flashed across the abandoned sector. Houses, streets, alleys I didn't know existed. One dot moved toward me, the figure, the dot vanished. And then another appeared, inside the house at the corner with the open door. It vanished too. I realized I wasn't following the map anymore. The map was following me, guiding me, waiting. I pulled the car to a stop again. Fog wrapped around the tires, curling upward, pressing against the windows. I felt it in my chest, a presence old and patient. The figure in the distance tilted its head, almost curious. Not threatening, not yet, just waiting for me to make a mistake. I held my breath. The fog shifted, shapes formed. Faces, screaming silently, pressed into the mist. Houses whispered as if alive. Floorboards creaked under invisible feet. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the laughter returned. This time layered, many voices. Children, adults, voices I didn't recognize, all echoing through the fog. The streetlights flickered again. The shadows of the houses stretched impossibly long, like they were reaching for me. I realized the abandoned sector wasn't abandoned at all. It was alive, breathing, waiting, collecting memories, sounds, presences. And now it had me. I finally turned the key and the engine roared to life again. Tires spun on wet asphalt. I drove without direction, following instinct more than roads. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, the fog thickened behind me and the distant figure appeared, always just a dot, always following. My heart thumped, chest tight. I realized something worse than being alone, being watched, being tracked, and not understanding the rules of the place you're in. Then the dashboard lights flickered and I saw something move across the windshield. Not fog, not reflection, a shadow just out of focus, stretching and bending unnaturally. My breath caught. The figure wasn't alone. Shapes pressed at the edges of vision, twisting, stretching, forming a procession that the fog carried along the streets. unseen until headlights illuminated them. The houses whispered again. Footsteps echoed inside walls. I tried to scream, but my voice was swallowed. Somewhere in the distance, a streetlight finally stayed on, bright, stark. For a heartbeat, I felt relief. Then it flickered, revealing dozens of shadows in the yards, frozen in impossible poses, all watching, all waiting. I gripped the wheel tighter, realizing I could drive forever and the streets would never let me leave. They were a maze designed to trap, to confuse, to study. The fog wasn't fog. It was the sector's consciousness, bending perception, feeding on fear. I drove past the final corner. The figure was gone, or maybe it had always been inside the fog. A single house at the end of the street remained. Door wide open, windows dark. Something shifted inside. I glanced toward it and saw movement I couldn't interpret. The fog pressed against the car. Whispers, indistinguishable yet urgent, calling me back. I realized I wasn't just navigating the sector. I was being guided, pulled, tested. And I didn't know if anyone had ever left once they entered. I slammed the car into gear and drove past it, past the open door, headlights cutting through mist. The sector stretched ahead, streets turning impossibly, fog thickening with every turn. The whispers grew louder, clearer, and I realized I hadn't been driving to see the abandoned houses. I had been driving to meet them. And they were waiting. I parked in front of the first house as the fog clung to the asphalt like wet cloth. Streetlights flickered, but here, closer to the houses, the darkness felt thicker, almost tactile. I stepped out, boots crunching on scattered glass and leaves. My flashlight cut a narrow cone of light ahead, trembling slightly in my grip. That was the first one, just a scrap of paper pinned to the front door with a rusted tack. I bent down and read it. She waited for the train that never came. Remember her. My breath caught. I hadn't known her name, hadn't known anyone had waited here. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, looping letters like someone had taken care to make it impossible to mistake. I looked around. Nothing. Just empty streets, fog curling along the pavement. And yet I could feel eyes pressing, patient. I shoved the note into my jacket, heart hammering. The second house had one too. Another note pinned to the peeling door. He never left. We remember him. A chill went down my spine. The words felt personal, intimate, as though the paper itself was alive, whispering secrets of a past I shouldn't know. I ran my hand over the wood, trying to feel its surface, trying to ground myself. The door creaked, though I hadn't touched it. My flashlight flickered. I swung it around. Shadows moved just beyond the light, shifting with a rhythm that didn't belong to wind or trees. I moved to the third house. The note was longer this time, almost a paragraph. The child in the attic still calls. The stairs remember her cries. I froze, my pulse thudded in my ears. I hadn't even stepped inside. And yet the words made me imagine it, tiny footsteps running up creaking stairs, a whimper echoing through a house long abandoned. I swallowed hard. The fog shifted and I thought I saw a figure pressed against a window, pale, unmoving, staring. I blinked. Nothing, just glass reflecting my own flashlight. I realized then the notes weren't random. They were chronological, dates, times, events. Each one referenced someone who had vanished from this sector years ago. Names I vaguely recognized from old police reports, local legends, whispers in the town. Every note made the emptiness of the streets heavier, more suffocating. These houses weren't abandoned. They were memorials or warnings. I didn't know which. I walked to the next house. The door was ajar. Inside, I could see furniture covered in sheets, the dust thick enough to leave footprints on. Another note lay pinned to the living room wall. He followed the light and never returned. Do not follow it. The words felt like a trap, and yet I couldn't look away. My flashlight trembled as I raised it. Something moved in the corner of the room, a shadow too fast to follow, too fluid to be human. I jerked back, my chest tight. I realized with a sinking feeling that the notes were directing me, almost guiding me through the streets, the houses, the fog, leading me somewhere. I stepped outside again, fog curling around my boots. The streetlights flickered in a rhythm now, almost like a heartbeat. I felt it in my chest, syncing with mine. I didn't want to, but I had to keep moving. Each house had a note, each note a memory, each memory a ghost. I turned down a narrow alley and the fog thickened, wrapping around the walls. A note fluttered at the end of the alley, pinned to a rusted gate. "Do you hear them? They're still waiting, they remember you." I shivered. My hands went icy. Remember me? I hadn't been here before. I didn't know these people. And yet the words felt meant for me, as if the sector itself was speaking. I felt watched, measured, tested. The fog shifted, thickened, pressing against my ears. I thought I could hear whispers, indistinct, urgent, but I couldn't place words. Just the weight of eyes, billions of eyes staring from the mist. I kept walking. The street twisted in impossible angles, familiar yet wrong. Houses appeared where the map said none should exist. Another note pinned to a lamppost. "Do not trust the light, it lies." I paused, my flashlight flickered. The lamppost buzzed, dimming the narrow circle of light around me. For a moment I saw movement, faint, fast, along the edges of the fog. Shapes shifting just out of focus. I took a step back. The note felt alive, pulsing with a warning I didn't understand. My pulse raced. The whispers grew louder, threading through my thoughts, brushing at my memory. I felt nausea twist my stomach. The next house had notes plastered on every door and window. Dates, names, cryptic warnings. One read. She looked for her mother and found only mirrors. Mirrors that remember. I peered into the window. I could see my reflection, but it was wrong. My face looked older, worn, eyes hollowed. My movements delayed, like the reflection wasn't following me but anticipating me. I stumbled back. The note slipped from my hand. I bent to pick it up. The reflection blinked once, slower than me, deliberately. My stomach knotted. Something in the house, in the sector, was alive. Something had been waiting, shaping, observing. I moved to the next street. Notes were now on telephone poles, fences, even the pavement, pinned down by stones or nails. Each one referenced events I had only heard whispers about in local news reports. Missing people, unexplained vanishings, bodies never found. The handwriting was always the same. Controlled, precise, almost patient. It unnerved me. The sector wasn't chaotic, it was methodical, deliberate. Every note a breadcrumb, every breadcrumb a trap. I felt it then, a shift in the air. Fog swirled around me, thickening at the edges of my vision. Shapes began to form, figures walking slowly, faces pressed to windows, silhouettes peering from alleys. They didn't move toward me. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough to unbalance me, to make the ground beneath feel unreal. I realized I had been walking in circles. Streets I thought I had passed no longer existed, replaced by unfamiliar roads lined with new notes. One note pinned to a low wall stopped me cold. "You will follow them. You will write their names. You will remember." A cold weight settled in my chest. I looked around. The fog seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. Shapes moved in the mist, closer now, forming a procession that stretched infinitely in every direction. The whispers became words, barely audible, pressing against my consciousness. "Remember, follow right," I stumbled, almost dropping my flashlight. My pulse raced, my stomach turned. I realized the notes weren't just warnings, they were instructions, demands, rules. I turned the corner and found the last house on the street. Door wide open, notes scattered across the yard, pinned to trees and mailboxes. One note lay in the center of the driveway, larger than the others, almost ceremonial. I bent to read it. "The past is never gone. The missing are never silent. They wait in the margins. Do not be late." The words hit me like a punch. I felt the fog press harder against my skin, cold, damp, almost tangible. I looked up. The house seemed different, not decayed, not abandoned. Windows glowing faintly, curtains twitching though no wind stirred. A shadow moved behind the glass, not human, not quite, and I knew without thinking that it was waiting for me to enter. I stumbled backward, footsteps behind me. I spun, nothing, fog thick and curling, swallowing everything. My flashlight flickered. The notes rustled in the unseen wind. I realized then that this sector wasn't just empty. It was alive, and the notes were its voice. Its way of pulling memories, people, stories together. And I had walked into its rhythm. It knew I was here. It had been waiting. I got back in my car, shaking, notes clutched in my hands. The fog pressed against the windshield as I started the engine. Headlights cut through the mist, illuminating empty streets and houses with scattered notes. I drove slowly, heart racing, knowing I hadn't seen everything yet. The sector was infinite, and I had only begun to understand its rules. Every note was a message, every shadow a warning, every house a trap. And I knew, deep down, that the notes weren't finished with me. The phone rang before I even touched it. Sharp, insistent, slicing through the dispatch center's quiet like a knife. I froze, hand hovering over the receiver. It wasn't a time for calls. Past midnight, screens flickering with empty streets, empty houses, fog creeping through the city like smoke. My instincts told me to ignore it. Something told me I wouldn't. I lifted the receiver. Silence. Then faintly, just below the hiss of the line, a whisper. Kashif. My name, not shouted, not frantic. Drawn out, slow, deliberate, echoing as if it had been waiting in the wires for me. I pulled back. Hello? My own voice sounded brittle, fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. Silence again. I pressed my forehead against the receiver, listening. Kashif. The whisper repeated. Same tone, same cadence. I knew it wasn't human, or if it wasn't alive in any way I understood. The line crackled, warped. Static surged and pulled, almost forming shapes in the air, images I couldn't quite hold. My heart pounded in rhythm with the ringing. I wanted to hang up. I couldn't. The voice had ownership of me. I checked the call log. No number, not even a trace. Like the call had always existed, waiting for me specifically. Waiting for me to answer. A shiver ran down my spine. The dispatcher in me, the trained professional, wanted to disconnect, to follow protocol. The man in me, the one who had been tracing empty streets, reading notes in abandoned houses, watching shapes in the fog, knew better. I was too deep now. The whisper came again, slightly louder, clearer. Kashif, come home. I pressed my palm to my face, trying to steady myself. Come home. I was already somewhere I shouldn't be, in a city that wasn't really a city anymore. A sector stitched together by fog, notes, and shadows. And this call was the culmination, the final thread. I couldn't not answer. I had to know. I gripped the receiver tighter. My knuckles went white. The center was empty. Screens hummed with static. The flickering lights above made shadows twist along the walls. And through all of it, the whisper repeated, patient, coaxing. I stepped back, letting the line pull me into silence. I tried to trace the sound, but it wasn't moving. It was everywhere at once. Then a new detail, the faintest, almost imperceptible echo behind the whisper, like another voice layered beneath it, older, rasping, sorrowful. Another presence, a memory of a voice long forgotten, intertwined with mine. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand. My pulse surged. The dispatcher in me wanted to rationalize. Technical glitch, prank call, a tape loop, anything. But the man in me, the one who had walked streets that shouldn't exist, read notes that remembered the dead, seen shapes in fog that remembered me, knew this was different. I was being called, not to answer, but to arrive. I lowered the receiver slightly. The whisper stopped for a heartbeat. Then faintly a click, like a lock opening somewhere far away. Not in the station, not in the city. Somewhere beyond the fog, beyond the streets, beyond the impossible alleys I had traced. It was a key or a signal, or maybe just a warning. My chest tightened. Kashif. The whisper now had urgency. The word stretched longer, sharper, breaking through the static, embedding itself in my thoughts. I realized suddenly that it wasn't just repeating my name. It was marking me, nomming me, claiming me. I could feel it in my bones, in the skin under my shirt, in the tightening of my chest. Every nerve in my body screamed that something had been waiting for this moment, orchestrating it across days, nights, empty streets, cryptic notes, abandoned houses. And now it had me. I set the receiver down but didn't let go. My hands trembled. Outside the window, the fog pressed closer to the glass, curling around the building like smoke around a candle. I could almost see shapes forming, thin, leaning silhouettes, faces blurred, watching. The city, the sector, the whispers, they weren't just empty now. They were alive, waiting, patient. and I knew that the phone call was only the beginning. Another sound, the faintest of footsteps. Not in the center, not even in the room, somewhere else. Behind me, I thought, but when I turned, nothing. Empty chairs, flickering monitors, notes scattered across desks, reminders of a past I had started to inherit. The footsteps were closer now, too measured, too deliberate. Every creak of the floor beneath them, timed with the static in the receiver. I picked up the phone again. This time I didn't even think to say anything. I just listened. The whisper was clearer now, layered, almost conversational. "Kashif, you see now, you always were here." I swallowed hard. I had to understand. The past 3 nights, the fog, the notes, the shadows, they were leading to this. Each call, each cryptic warning, each empty street, all pointing to the moment I now faced. I wasn't calling them. They were calling me. And the line was the bridge. A new layer joined the whisper, faint, trembling, desperate. "Don't leave, stay with us. Stay with us." The words sent an icy chill down my spine. My mind raced. Who was us? The vanished, the sector, the shapes in the fog. I realized with a sinking feeling that it didn't matter. Whoever or whatever spoke now held authority over reality itself, and I was bound to listen. I leaned closer to the receiver. The center lights flickered violently. Static surged into a low hum, and then almost imperceptibly the hum formed a voice behind mine. My own voice. Not me speaking. Not the dispatcher in me. Something else, echoing, mimicking, whispering my thoughts before I could think them. "Kashif." I pulled back, sweat on my brow, breath catching. My reflection in the dark window stared back, but wrong. My eyes glowed faintly, almost silver, shapes twisting behind them. I staggered. The city outside, the sector shifted in the fog. Streets rearranged themselves, houses I had passed before appearing anew. I realized that the phone call wasn't just a call. It was the sector itself, communicating, converging, aligning with me. Another click, a whisper, my name. I felt a tug in my chest, not physical but undeniable, like gravity pulling me towards something I couldn't see. I wanted to resist. My fingers trembled on the desk. The line hissed, and then a word that cut deeper than any shadow or note. "Home." I choked back a scream. Home, not the dispatch center, not the streets, not the city, somewhere else, somewhere waiting, somewhere that knew me, always had. And I knew impossibly that I would have to follow, that this call, this final ring, was not just a warning. It was an invitation, a summons, and the whispers would not stop until I answered. I tried to hang up. The receiver wouldn't leave my hand. I tried to pull back, to step away, but my own strength faltered. The whisper layered itself over my thoughts now, insidious, rhythmic, inescapable. "Kashif, follow, remember, stay." I felt my knees buckle. The monitors flickered. Shadows stretched across the walls like fingers reaching for me. The fog outside pressed against the windows harder than ever. I realized I wasn't just being called. I was being rewritten, incorporated, folded into something vast, endless, patient. The sector, the fog, the missing, the notes, they were all one now, and I was the final piece. Then silence. The phone lay still in my hands. The monitors hummed. The room looked ordinary again, quiet, but I knew better. I knew the whispers hadn't left. They were waiting, lingering in the wires, in the fog, in the corners of the room I couldn't see. And the word home echoed in my mind, soft, insistent, eternal. I set the receiver down, tried to breathe, tried to remind myself that it was just a call, just a whisper, but deep down a part of me knew the truth. The call would come again, and when it did, it would not be alone. I stared at the desk. The notes I had gathered from the streets and houses lay scattered, curling under the light. They were waiting, patient, silent now, but alive. And I realized that the final ring was not an end. It was a beginning. The sector had marked me, and I would never be free. The line was dead, but the whisper repeated my name in the silence of the room, soft, deliberate, and utterly relentless. "Kashif." The bridge appeared out of nowhere. One moment I was on the highway, headlights cutting through a shallow fog. The next I was staring down a stretch of steel and shadow that seemed to float over nothing. No lights, no cars, no sound beyond the steady hum of my engine. Something about it felt wrong and my gut tightened. I've been driving trucks for 15 years, seen storms, black ice, and more blind curves than I can count. But this was different. I remember gripping the wheel tighter, feeling the vibration of the tires echo through my palms. The fog hugged the bridge like a living thing, curling around the cables, around the railings, swallowing the river below. I tried to tell myself it was just a low fog, nothing to worry about. But then I noticed the signs, not the usual warnings about weight limits or speed. These were older, rusted markers, edges flacking, barely readable, and the symbols were wrong, like someone had carved them into the metal. Symbols that weren't familiar. I blinked. Headlights caught something in the mist, something on the side of the road, a figure maybe, or just a shadow. I squinted. The fog shifted, teasing me, and the shape was gone. My heart skipped. I told myself it was a trick of the fog, a shadow tossed by my own lights, but the unease stayed. I started driving slower. The road felt endless, a narrow strip of asphalt suspended in gray nothing. I glanced at the guardrails, old steel, corroded, dented. As I passed one section, I thought I saw scratch marks, deep grooves running along the metal. Fresh, too fresh, jagged, like someone had clawed at it. I shook my head. The wind rattled the cab and I pulled the wheel tighter, trying to steady myself. Halfway across, the radio crackled, just a whisper of static at first. Then a voice, low, distant, breaking through the static like it had been waiting to be heard. "Driver." I froze. The voice was faint but unmistakable. Not the CB chatter I was used to, not any channel I had on. Just there, I tried to call back. Nothing. The static swelled for a moment, then cleared. Silence. I told myself it was a trick, maybe interference from the bridge's metal. Maybe an old signal bouncing from the past. My chest tightened. I pressed on. The fog thickened. My headlights barely cut through it, just enough to catch the edges of the steel beams, the shadowed cables. Then out of nowhere, a figure on the bridge, a man, or a man-shaped blur, standing in the middle of my lane. I slammed the brakes, tires squealing. Nothing. No one, just fog. My hands trembled and I gripped the wheel so hard I thought my fingers might break. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things. Headlights playing tricks, shadows moving faster than my eyes could track. But there was something in the air, a presence. The kind of presence you can feel on your skin, in the back of your neck, something alive but unseen. I kept driving cautiously. Then I noticed tire marks on the bridge, deep ruts worn into the asphalt, fresh like a truck had passed before me recently. But the road had been empty for hours. No other headlights, no sounds, just my engine, the hum of tires, and the fog. I followed the marks with my eyes. They didn't lead to the other side. They disappeared in the middle of the bridge, vanished, like the vehicle that made them had never existed. I swallowed hard. My mind raced. Stories I'd heard over the years flashed in my memory, truckers disappearing on this route, abandoned rigs found months later, cargo untouched but drivers gone. I'd always thought it was exaggeration, local legends. Now, gripping the wheel, sweat on my forehead, I wasn't so sure. The bridge seemed to stretch longer with every passing second. The cables above groaned, soft at first, then louder, like the bridge itself was sighing, alive under the weight of the night. The fog thickened even more, and I realized I couldn't see the other end. Just endless gray. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then a sound, a thump. From beneath the truck, I thought, tires. Something hitting the asphalt. I glanced in the mirrors. Nothing. Another thump, closer this time, reverberating through the frame. The fog swirled faster and the bridge felt unstable, like it was breathing beneath me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following, packing me from below, just out of sight. I tried to radio for help. CB static answered. Nothing else. No response. My voice sounded small in the cab, swallowed by the bridge, the fog, the night. I tried again, louder. Silence. Only the hum of my engine, the creak of the steel, and my own breathing. Halfway across, I saw something impossible. A truck. Old, rusted cab, twisted, lights out. No plates, no markings, parked in the middle of the lane ahead. My brakes screamed as I came to a halt. The engine idling, I stared. The fog swirled around it, moving unnaturally. Shadows danced along the sides, flickering. And then I saw the figure inside, or what I thought was inside. A man, or the shape of a man, sitting perfectly still, head forward. Hands on the wheel. I couldn't see the face, just a silhouette. And then slowly, impossibly, it lifted its head, turned toward me. Not a movement like a person, more like the air shifted and carried the image. My stomach dropped, the eyes, or where the eyes should be. Black holes, empty, pulling me closer without moving. I slammed my foot on the accelerator and swerved around it. No tires screamed this time. No brakes, just fog, and the truck gone. The lane ahead was empty, nothing but steel, mist, and night. My hands shook so hard I could barely hold the wheel. I told myself it wasn't real. Had to be the fog, the shadows, exhaustion. But I knew better. The bridge seemed longer now, stretching, bending under the night sky. My lights caught shapes at the edge, shapes I couldn't identify. Faces, just clouds. I didn't stop looking. Every shadow held a story, every shift of fog a warning. My pulse raced. I wanted to reach the other side, to see solid ground, anything familiar. But the farther I drove, the further away it seemed. Then a sound I can't forget. Laughing. Low, dry, echoing along the steel beams. Not a joke, not mirth. Something cruel, patient. I slammed my hand to the horn, blaring, desperately hopping to wake someone, anything. Silence returned, but the laughter lingered, fatting into the fog. I kept driving, every mile longer than the last. I passed more shapes in the fog, fleeting glimpses of what might have been people, or just my mind breaking. I couldn't tell anymore. I thought of those who had disappeared here before me, drivers, cars, all swallowed by the bridge. And I understood the weight of their fear, the endless weight they must have felt, trapped between steel and shadow, fog and night. Then lights on the horizon, solid, warm, the far side. My pulse quickened, relief. I pressed on, gripping the wheel, teeth gritted. The fog thinned slightly, shapes retreating into nothingness. Maybe I was going to make it. Maybe the bridge would release me. But then a whisper, soft, carried on the wind through the cab vents. My name. Kashif. I froze, headlights catching movement in the shadows right at the edge of the bridge. Figures, dozens of them, shapes moving with purpose, waiting, watching, not attacking, just waiting. The whisper repeated, closer, sharper, not from outside, from inside, my head, my thoughts. I reached the other side, the road solid under my tires. The fog lifted slowly, like it had never existed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the bridge was still alive behind me, watching, and the shapes, and the whisper. They weren't gone, just waiting, patient. I parked, engine still running, hands trembling. I tried to convince myself it was over. But even as I left the cab, the sound of metal under fog, the echo of tires on asphalt, the whisper of voices in my mind, it followed, always followed. And I knew, one night, one bridge, one crossing, but not the last. The bridge waits, the fog waits, and next time I won't be the first, or the last. The fog was thicker this time, thicker than any night I'd ever driven through. It didn't just obscure the road, it swallowed it. Headlights barely cut a path, their beams bouncing off nothing, like the mist was alive, pushing back. I gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles white, heartbeat hammering. Every sound from the truck, engine, tires, metal groans, echoed back at me, warped, stretched as if the bridge itself was listening. And then I saw them, shadows at the edge of my headlights, figures, human-shaped but wrong, limbs too long, torsos bending at angles that shouldn't exist. They didn't move, not exactly, but they shifted in the corner of my vision, melting into one another and then apart. I swerved slightly, trying to keep them in view. They were standing along the cables, starring, or at least I thought they were. The fog made it impossible to tell. My mirrors caught movement I wasn't expecting. I glanced at the passenger side mirror. For a brief second, the road behind me wasn't empty. It was crowded. Trucks abandoned, cars crushed or overturned, lights flickering in the haze. People, drivers, passengers, faces twisted in fear, pressed against windshields. and then just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. My reflection showed only me, staring back, pale and sweating. The fog clung to me, pressing against the cab, filling every crack, slipping under doors. My hands shook. I told myself it was hallucination, exhaustion, imagination after the last crossing. But deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining. The bridge was alive. It remembered. It wanted. The figures appeared again, closer now. On the railings, leaning over, suspended above the river, I couldn't see. Their forms seemed to flicker in and out of existence, like old film reels, frames misaligned. One reached toward me. Not a hand exactly, just a shape, reaching, pulling the air as if it could grab my soul. My stomach dropped. I slammed my foot down, tires squealing, and the truck lurched forward. The mirrors showed more. Scenes. Horrific, fleeting glimpses of past crossings. A trucker frozen in the fog, eyes wide, mouth screaming but no sound escaping. A family in a car, rear view reflecting something I couldn't identify, crouching behind them. Every image vanished before I could focus, leaving only echoes in my mind. My chest tightened. I realized I was driving through memory itself. Not just the bridge, but the mistakes, the disappearances, the lives it had claimed. I tried to tell myself it was a warning, a cautionary trick of light and shadow. But the bridge doesn't warn. It tests. It hung there in the fog, stretching farther than it should, longer than logic allows. My tires hummed, cab shaking with every heartbeat, and the figures danced closer. One step away, I felt the weight of them, the pressure of all the people who had vanished here pressing down on me at once. Then a voice, whispering, soft, deliberate, not through the CB this time, not through any speaker, inside my head. "Driver." I froze. My hands clenched the wheel, fingernails biting into the leather. The whisper repeated, almost impatiently, "Driver, look." I glanced at the side mirror again. The fog had shifted, revealing something I hadn't noticed before. A ledger lying across the road in front of me, pages fluttering in the wind, though the air felt still. Names, dates, last known locations. All of them had boarded the bridge and none had arrived. Each name etched into my mind. Each one a reminder that I wasn't the first to pass this way, and I might not be the last. I tried to swerve around the ledger. Tires spun on slick asphalt, but it was gone, vanished into the fog. My pulse raced. My vision narrowed. The figures were closer. Dark silhouettes framing the edge of the cab, their faces, if faces they had, pressed against the mist, watching. I caught one movement in my mirror. A driver, same pose I had been in hours ago, frozen, staring, eyes empty. I wanted to stop. I wanted to shut my eyes, but something inside me, stubborn, stupid bravery, pressed me onward. The bridge seemed to stretch further, longer than reality allowed. Every second stretched into minutes, every fog swirl hiding shapes, movements, warnings. I noticed the steel cables above, groaning under weight I couldn't see. The air smelled metallic, like blood, like rust, like history. Then a hand appeared, on the dashboard. My hand froze, turning toward it. Nothing, empty space. Yet the pressure lingered like someone had just let go. I glanced at the side mirror again. Another scene. A truck overturned, driver outside climbing over guardrails, fog curling around him. And then, impossibly, the scene merged with my own cab. For a heartbeat, I was both inside and outside, watching myself from above, terrified, trapped in the fog. The whisper returned, "You shouldn't be here." I slammed my foot down, tires screamed. Fog swirled, a vortex around me. And the figures, they moved with me, shadowing the cab, keeping pace. One leaned closer, pressing its face featureless yet somehow familiar against the glass. I couldn't see eyes, but I felt them, watching, judging, waiting. The reflection in my mirror flickered. I saw myself, pale and sweating, but behind me dozens of others. Drivers who had vanished, frozen in time, pressed against the windows, reaching, whispering, begging. The bridge seemed endless. The fog thickened again. Headlights cut through it, but not far enough. I could feel the edge of the bridge slipping beneath me, though I was still moving. Tires hummed, engine roared, but the world felt hollow, unreal. Shapes danced in the fog, teasing, disappearing, reappearing in mirrors. I realized I wasn't just crossing a bridge. I was walking through a record of the lost, the missing, the erased. Then a brief calm, Fog thinning just enough to see the horizon, the far end. Lights, solid, real, hope. I pressed forward, desperate. But the figures didn't retreat. They waited along the cables, along the sides, watching. The whisper grew louder, pressing in on my ears, my thoughts. Look at them. Look at what you follow. I glanced in the mirror one last time. The ledger. Pages fluttering, names written in a script I recognized but couldn't place. Each name had a shadow beside it, a figure, a presence that pressed against the cab but couldn't enter. Yet, my pulse raced. The shapes flickered, one leaning forward, reaching, and then just as quickly vanished. The fog swallowed it, leaving only the quiet hum of my engine and the wind against steel. I crossed the final stretch, tires rolling onto solid asphalt. The bridge behind me faded into fog, distant, unreal, a dream I couldn't escape. I parked, chest heaving, hands shaking, staring at the empty horizon. The figures were gone. The whispers had stopped, for now. But I knew better. The mirrors, the shadows, the ledger, they would remain, waiting, not gone, only patient. And one day the fog would return. One day the bridge would call again, and next time I wouldn't be alone. I slid out of the cab, breathing hard. The air smelled clean, normal, but I could still feel it. The pressure, the eyes, the weight of all who had crossed and never returned. I wanted to tell myself it was over, that I had survived. But the ledger, the whispers, the figures in fog, they lingered in my mind. Always watching, always waiting. And I understood, finally, what the bridge wanted. It wanted memory. It wanted attention. It wanted acknowledgement. And most of all, it wanted company. I started the truck again, moving away slowly, headlights cutting through the thinning mist. But even as I drove, even as the world seemed normal, I felt it. The fog, the shapes, the ledger fluttering in some impossible space just beyond sight, waiting, patient. And I knew I would never forget. The bridge ended, or at least I thought it did. Headlights cut through the fog, shining on asphalt that should have led to something familiar, something real, but it didn't. The road stretched straight and unbroken, lined by shadows that looked like trees at first, then like bodies, then nothing at all. I killed the engine for a moment, trying to catch my breath. Silence, but not the kind that comforts. A heavy, waiting silence, like the air itself was holding something back. I tried to tell myself I had left Blackwater behind, that the bridge was over, the fog passed. But every sign, every landmark looked the same. The same cracked pavement, the same faint yellow lines curling like snakes in the dim glow. I passed the same abandoned gas station twice before I realized it, or maybe 3 times. Each time the sign's letters flickered, rearranging themselves, spelling out names I knew but couldn't place. Drivers missing, locals vanished, people who shouldn't exist anymore. My hands shook on the wheel. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing, or maybe everything. The fog clung to the distance like a curtain, and behind it shapes moved. Slow, deliberate, humanish but wrong. I blinked and they were gone. I rubbed my eyes. The road ahead curved the same way, streetlights flickering in the exact pattern. I tried to turn onto a side street. Nothing. Dead end. Every turn led back here to this same stretch of endless asphalt. Then I heard it, a horn, distant, not mine. A big rig barreling toward me, headlights slicing through the mist. I swerved, tires squealed, nothing. I slammed on the brakes. Silence. No sound, no truck, just the fog swirling like smoke from a phantom fire. My heart hammered. I told myself it was nerves, fatigue, the bridge still lingering in my mind. But that sound, it was real. It had been there. The road seemed longer than physics allowed. Trees leaned in closer, branches clawing at my cab, scraping paint, leaving faint streaks. Shadows lengthened in ways they shouldn't. I thought I caught movement in a side mirror, something crouched, waiting, watching. I flicked the mirror, but there was nothing. The road ahead endless. The horizon hazy. The fog curling like smoke over a hidden fire I couldn't see. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the bridge, maybe the town of Blackwater itself, was a trap. A memory, a loop, a record of everything that had gone wrong here. Maybe leaving wasn't about distance, but acknowledgement. Maybe the road was testing me, demanding I see the past, or it would keep me wandering forever. I reached for my CB, hands trembling. Channel open, static crackling. I called for any station, anyone who could confirm I'd left the bridge. Nothing, just static humming low, vibrating through the cab. I repeated it louder, desperate. Then a voice, faint, familiar, my own. You never left. I froze. The words slithered into my mind unbidden, like something had reached inside and whispered them directly to my thoughts. I slammed the CB down, heart hammering. That wasn't a voice on the radio. That was inside me. And somehow I knew it was right. The fog thickened again, pressing against the cab, seeping through every crack. Headlights cut through it, but only for a few feet. Shapes formed, shadows at the edges, not stationary this time. They moved, approaching, watching, silent, waiting. And when I glanced in the mirrors, the reflections were wrong. Not just me, but dozens of me, each driving a truck, each tense, eyes wide, caught in the same loop. Some appeared older, more terrified, others younger, unaware, naive. And yet all of us were here together, trapped in the same stretch of road. I drove faster. I needed to leave. I needed to break the loop. But the road ahead didn't bend, didn't end, didn't shift. It repeated. The same patch of cracked asphalt, the same leaning trees, the same shadows watching from the edge. I passed the same abandoned gas station again, letters flickering. Names, faces I recognized. Names scratched into the walls, dates faded but present. People who had crossed the bridge, people who had disappeared into Blackwater's memory. I thought about stopping, turning off the engine, waiting. Maybe the road would end if I gave up, if I surrendered. But fear clawed at me, a living thing. The thought of being stuck here forever, joining the figures in the fog, drove me forward. I gripped the wheel harder, knuckles white, knuckles raw. The mirrors showed them again. People who shouldn't exist anymore, trapped reflections, watching me, reaching toward me with hollow hands. I turned the wheel sharply, trying to avoid them. The mirrors didn't respond. The mirrors lied. Then the road shifted, or maybe I did. A curve I didn't remember, leading past a row of houses I didn't recognize. Faint lights flickering in windows, too dim to illuminate the streets. Doors opening and closing by themselves. Shadows moving inside. I passed one, slowed, heart hammering, and swore I saw someone looking straight at me. Not through the glass, not a reflection, but really looking, recognizing me, knowing me, and then gone, swallowed by fog. The whisper returned, not in the CB this time, not in my head at first, just faint, carried on the wind. You've always been here, I froze. The words seeped into my bones. The fog parted for a heartbeat, revealing the bridge behind me. I had crossed it, hadn't I? I remembered the railing, the river, the endless cables. But here it was, stretching back endlessly, a black ribbon into the mist. And I was here. Again. Panic rose. My foot slammed the accelerator. Tires spun, cab rattling, engine screaming. I passed the same twisted tree, the same patch of cracked asphalt, over and over until the horizon blurred impossible. Then I caught a movement in the mirror again. Not a shadow, not a shape. A person walking along the edge of the road. Slow, deliberate, familiar. A trucker I remembered from a crossing months ago. He waved, or thought he did, but his face hollow, smiling in a way that should be impossible. Then he faded. I yelled, a sound lost in the cab, lost in the fog. Tires squealed as I swerved, trying to break the pattern. But the road didn't bend, didn't yield. The figures appeared at every edge more now, pressing from every direction, reflections overlapping, past and present merging in a twisted dance. I could see myself again in the mirrors, pale and sweating, realizing what was happening. The loop, the memory, the trap. I forced the truck into the shoulder, cab shaking. Headlights cut through the fog for a few feet. I stopped completely. Silence. The mirrors reflected only me, yet I knew it was a lie. Somewhere beyond the fog, beyond perception, the others waited. The road behind stretched infinitely, forward stretched infinitely, and I was stuck. A lone traveler in a memory that wasn't mine, yet demanded recognition. I tried reasoning, counting steps, watching the horizon, forcing the mirrors to tell truth. Nothing worked. The fog moved like a tide, curling, rolling, reshaping the road as I blinked. Shapes appeared, dissolved. Shadows walked along lines of light that weren't real. I realized finally that leaving wasn't about turning around. It wasn't about speed or willpower. It was about understanding. about acknowledging the lives, the vanishings, the endless crossings, and I hadn't yet. A gust of wind slammed the cab. Papers fluttered on the dashboard. I caught one, a map old, faded, marked with locations I knew and others I didn't. Blackwater at the center, the bridge, the road, the endless loops radiating from it, and names, the ledger again. I didn't understand how it was here in my cab, but it was, waiting, patient, watching me. I felt the weight of every person who had driven this road before, their terror, their confusion, their hope of escape. All of it pressed against me, almost tangible, almost physical. I started the truck again, slowly, carefully. Mirrors flickered. The figures retreated for a heartbeat. I drove forward, uncertain, terrified, but moving. The road stretched ahead, straight, unyielding. The horizon flickered. I passed familiar landmarks, but each time slightly different. A signpost rotated its letters. A tree leaned differently. Houses blinked in and out of reality. The loop was alive, shifting, watching, learning. Then for the briefest moment, I thought I saw the edge of the town. Blackwater behind me. Real asphalt, not fog, not shapes. Relief washed through me, brief, fragile. I breathed hard, thinking I'd done it, escaped. But the mirrors, I shouldn't have looked. The mirrors showed me, but not just me. Dozens of me lined along the road, each gripping a wheel, each trying to escape, each trapped in their own crossing. And the whisper, now louder, echoing through the cab, through my mind. You never left. I slammed my foot down, tires squealing. Headlights cut through the fog. The road twisted subtly. The loop continued, endless. Blackwater wasn't a town, it wasn't a place. It was a pattern, a memory, a trap. And I was inside it, again. I drove on, chest tight, mind racing. Fog curling at the edges, shapes appearing and dissolving. The mirrors reflecting not reality but possibility, past and present, what had been and what could be. I realized then that leaving wasn't about distance. Leaving wasn't about speed. Leaving wasn't even about choice. It was about recognition, understanding, survival, and I didn't yet have either. The road stretched forward, infinite. Headlights cutting feebly through mist, shapes shifting, mirrors lying, whispers pressing. I understood the truth, bitter and cold. The bridge had only been the beginning. Blackwater wasn't behind me. It was inside me, and the road was endless. I gripped the wheel, drove forward.